Chapter 38:49. The war had ended with Yi Shiwen defeating the Storm Heavenly Monarch. In fact, he had even killed the Storm Heavenly Monarch. This battle had shocked the entire primal chaos. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was very strong. However, no one had an intuitive impression of how strong he was. On this day, Yi Shiwen had used the life of the Storm Heaven Monarch to declare to everyone how strong he was. Besides the Storm Heavenly Monarch, the Inferno Heavenly Monarch also died in his hands. These two achievements were enough to set off Yi Shiwen's terrifying strength. The Fate Creation Heavenly Monarch was probably just like this. Yi Shiwen sneered. He kept the Storm Heavenly Monarch's corpse into his inner world and watered the world tree. He could feel that the rulers who were spying on him had left. Yi Shiwen not only shocked the entire Chaos realm in this battle, but he also shocked them. He made them understand that they had completely underestimated Yi Shiwen. In the face of such a terrifying existence, if they wanted to make a move on Yi Shiwen, then they would have to see if they had such a good appetite. Yi Shiwen had killed the Storm Heavenly Monarch in a thunderous manner. He had done so in order to deter these people and to win some time for himself. It could be said that Yi Shiwen was killing a chicken to warn the monkeys. However, the Storm Heavenly Lord didn't know that he, a dignified ruler, had become a chicken to warn the monkeys. He didn't know that it didn't matter who offended him in Yi Shiwen's hands. However, the Storm Heavenly Monarch could also be someone else. It did not matter. The only thing he wanted to do was to buy time for himself, as expected of a martial monarch. Apart from him, who else could do it? Now, in the entire martial epic, many people no longer addressed Yi Shiwen as a martial venerable. Instead, they addressed him as a martial monarch. It meant that he was comparable to the heaven monarchs. In many people's opinion, Yi Shiwen indeed had such qualifications. Although he was not a ruler, yet there was no difference between him and a ruler. The martial monarch is mighty. Long live the martial monarch. Many people were cheering. This battle had established the supreme prestige of the martial epic. Even those ancient eras would have to consider whether they really wanted to compete with the martial epic and fight to the death. Fortunately, they soon heaved a sigh of relief because they realized that Yi Shiwen would not participate in their ordinary battles. In fact, he wouldn't even lend a hand in a battle between half-step sovereigns. Everyone understood that Yi Shiwen would only take action in a battle between sovereigns. However, for someone like him, he wasn't interested in ordinary battles. Asking him to make a move was an insult to him. After the shocking battle, everything returned to normal. If 100,000 years wasn't enough, then 200,000 years. If 100,000 years wasn't enough, then 1,000,000 years was enough. In the face of time, there is nothing that cannot be smoothed over. Yi Shiwen went into closed-door training after he had killed the Storm Heavenly Lord. The Middle Heavenly Lord had also become more low-key after this battle. He had also realized that his cultivation was insufficient. So, he had begun to practice crazily. 1,000,000 years after another passed. The martial epic, which should have started to decline, had enriched the martial epic's heavenly Tao due to the eras that Yi Shiwen had destroyed, allowing the martial epic's heavenly Tao to remain strong. The Fortune God dynasty's prestige had spread throughout the primal chaos. Among them, the human race was naturally the strongest. There were countless experts, including many heavenly venerables. Yi Mo and the others had stepped into the ranks of peak heavenly venerables. Even Biense, Little Crescent Moon, and the others had stepped into the ranks of peak heavenly venerables. In one fell swoop, the number of peak heavenly venerables in the human race had exceeded 10. They were known as the 10 Great Peak Heavenly Venerables. The number of other heavenly venerables was several times that. With their strength alone, they could rival an ancient era's foundation. In the blink of an eye, another 10,000,000 years had passed. The Fortune God dynasty finally made a new move. Originally, the Fortune God dynasty's southern heavenly venerate had broken through to the half-step sovereign realm. On that day, heaven and earth had changed color. The terrifying half-step sovereign realm heavenly tribulation had shocked everyone. However, The final result was that Southern Heavenly Venerate had failed to break through to the half-step sovereign realm and died tragically. It could be said that this had caused a huge uproar in the Fortune God dynasty. Although the current Fortune Divine dynasty was many times stronger compared to tens of millions of years ago, an existence like Heavenly Venerable Nan had always been one of the strongest Heavenly Venerables in the Fortune Divine dynasty. Even now, he was still one of the strongest Heavenly Venerables. After Southern Heavenly Venerate, several other peak Heavenly Venerables tried to break through to the half-step sovereign realm. However, without exception, all of them failed. This included Northern Heavenly Venerate and several 10 great divine cities castellans. They had been stuck at peak Heavenly Venerables for countless years, unable to break through. They would rather take a risk and try to break through. However, their deaths had undoubtedly caused a huge upheaval in the Fortune God dynasty. Even a Middle Heavenly Venerate, who had been in seclusion for a long time, had no choice but to personally reappoint these great Heavenly Venerables. At this time, the human race also sent a decree from Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had resigned from his position as the Fortune God dynasty's Eastern Heavenly Venerate. At this time, it was really inappropriate for him to remain as the Eastern Heavenly Venerate. However, the Middle Heavenly Venerate considered it again and again. Taking into account that the entire Eastern region was about to become the human race's stronghold, coupled with Yi Shiwen's contributions to the Fortune God dynasty, he finally appointed Little Crescent Moon as the new Eastern Heavenly Venerate. It could be considered as a daughter inheriting her father's position. If it were someone else becoming the Eastern Heavenly Venerate, perhaps the entire Eastern region might not be convinced. This was especially true for the human race. Currently, the human race's strength could be said to be the strongest in the universe. They had countless experts. No matter who became the Eastern Heavenly Venerate, they would not be convinced. However, everyone was convinced that this person was Little Crescent Moon. With a father like Yi Shiwen, there was no better choice than this. In the end, although the martial epoch appointed a new batch of primes, many people soon discovered that with the fall of these primes, the martial epoch started to weaken. The birth rate of geniuses of various races had clearly decreased. There were also experts of various races who found it much more difficult to break through. It was not like before, where it was as easy as eating and drinking. When the martial epoch was strong, it was very easy for them to break through. It could be said that their cultivation was closely related to the entire martial epoch. Another 10 million years passed, and this trend became even more obvious. It became increasingly difficult for the experts of various races to break through, and it became increasingly difficult for those at the bottom to climb up. It was not like the previous 10 million years, when the experts and geniuses all erupted like a volcano. Some sensitive Heavenly Venerables even sensed the aura of decay and destruction in the air. The originally inconspicuous destruction laws actually became more and more obvious. Some cultivators who cultivated in the great Tao of destruction saw their strength improve by leaps and bounds. As for experts who cultivated in other great Tao, they could clearly feel that their cultivation was becoming increasingly difficult. At this point, many people finally confirmed that the martial epoch had entered a declining period. This was a prophecy from a distant myth. It was recorded in ancient myths and fables. An epoch was divided into several periods from its birth to its death. The first period was the newly born primal chaos period, when many innate gods ruled over a region. The second period was the growth period when the various foreign tribes ruled over the world. Several half-step rulers ruled over the world. However, the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch appeared out of nowhere and established the Fortune God dynasty, successfully ending this period. After the departure of the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch and the appearance of Martial Monarch Yi Shiwen, the Martial Monarch was the maturing period of the martial epoch. During this period, the martial epoch would slowly reach its peak. Then, Yi Shiwen successfully ascended to the throne and saved the martial epoch from danger. Then, he successfully conquered the primal chaos and destroyed many ancient epochs. The Fortune God dynasty and the martial epoch reached their peak. This was the peak period of the martial epoch. After the peak period, the martial epoch would inevitably enter a declining period. This would be a long process. During this process, the martial epoch would gradually decline. Slowly, the experts would wither, and then the living beings would wither. After that, landslides and tsunamis would occur everywhere. Volcanoes would erupt, and even heaven and earth would crumble. That would be the true doomsday of the martial epoch. That apocalypse would destroy all the life forms of the martial epoch. Only a small portion of them would survive with the protection of heavenly venerates, half-step sovereigns, or sovereigns. The rest would perish in that apocalypse. This doomsday might even spread to the boundless primal chaos. Even the ancient epoch would have to face a great enemy. This process would continue until the birth of the next epoch. This was because too many epochs had been born in the primal chaos. People were already familiar with this process. Hence, the experts of the martial epoch all understood that the martial epoch was entering a declining period. Many people started lamenting. Although they were prepared for this and understood that this step was unavoidable, when the martial epoch entered its waning phase, many people still despaired. Now, fighting with the ancient epochs was no longer the most important thing. They had to start preparing for the martial epoch's destruction. They had to figure out how to establish a base in the primal chaos that could allow the martial epoch survivors to survive, just like the ancient epochs before them. Even if they were in the martial epoch, there would not be any difference. Everything was filled with the aura of destruction. All this even affected the human race. Experts fell one after another, becoming increasingly violent. The number of new human experts and geniuses decreased. The human race also started to make preparations. Even if this declining period would take a long time, they had to make preparations in advance. The human race could not protect everyone. They could only choose the elites to protect the human bloodline in the primal chaos. Just as everyone was feeling anxious, Yishiwen came out of closed-door cultivation. Chapter 3850. Yishiwen had also sensed that the destructive aura was gradually becoming denser. That was why he came out of closed-door cultivation. Anyone with a certain level of cultivation could feel the increase in the destructive aura. That kind of suppressive feeling was suffocating. The elements and spiritual energy in the world were no longer as active. Instead, they gradually fell into a deathly stillness. Naturally, Yishiwen was the first to sense this change. Of course, the decline of the martial epoch had just started. There was still a long time before the martial epoch's destruction. However, going downhill right after experiencing the peak was not a good feeling. Of all the periods, the peak period was actually the shortest. This period was also the most difficult to endure. It was like boiling a frog in warm water. You would be boiled to death bit by bit, watching yourself die bit by bit. This feeling was the most horrifying. Of course, given Yishiwen's current cultivation, even if the martial epoch was destroyed, he would not die. However, he could understand that feeling. After Yishiwen came out of closed-door cultivation, he immediately sought out the middle heavenly venerate. He even sought out the martial sect master, Qinzun, who was in closed-door cultivation. The three of them sat across from each other. In a sense, in the current martial epoch, only the three of them were qualified to sit on equal footing. Although Yishiwen's combat prowess had already reached the ruler realm, it could not hide the fact that he was only a half-step ruler. May I know why fellow Taoist has sought out the two of us? The middle heavenly venerate was the first to speak as the three sat across from each other in the divine court. The middle heavenly venerate had the most doubts in his heart. Basically, he had been the one to worry about the martial epoch in the past few years. Be it Yishiwen or Qinzun, they were both in closed-door cultivation for a long time. Even when the storm heavenly monarch invaded, Yishiwen was startled and made a move. However, Qinzun did not come out of closed-door cultivation. 10 million years had passed until now. I believe that the two of you should have already sensed the recent changes in the world. Yishiwen said calmly. In the end, the martial epoch is still declining. If this continues, I'm afraid its destruction is only a matter of time, Qinzun said. Recently, when Xiao Chun cultivated and comprehended, he also felt that the great Tao had started to turn blurry. It was no longer as clear as before. The martial epoch was heading towards its declining phase. Everything seemed to have entered a declining phase. However, Xiao Chun could not do anything about it. Looks like we have to plan early and collect some elite seeds. Then, when the epoch is ending, we can preserve more vitality for the martial epoch. Middle Heavenly Venerate said. There was nothing he could do about it either. He could only make early preparations. The epic era was the great Tao of the world. I great and Tao I yi Tao the Tao yi the Tao I and I Tian the Tao. And Tao yi said Tao they yi he. Why don't you just say it? Qinzun said. Yi Tao yi. Ting yi yi. Yi yi he. Of yi. Of cultivation. Of yi. Yi and. However, Yi Shiwen's words still frightened him. Could it be that Tao? Are you planning to conquer the ancient epoch? If that happens, our martial epoch will end up in a state of being ganged up on. The Middle Heavenly Venerate said. When he thought of that scene, he could not help sucking in a breath of cold air. Although the martial epoch and the many ancient epochs had fought each other in the past few years, to the point where both sides nearly fought to the point of bleeding, it was still within the limits of restraint. Although Middle Heavenly Venerate had destroyed an ancient epoch in the process, it was not a big deal. That was because those ancient epochs were all patient. They were waiting for the martial epoch to be destroyed. However, if the martial epoch wantonly attacked the ancient epoch again, it would be a different matter. Those ancient epochs would probably group up and attack. They would not let the martial epoch off so easily. This was an absolutely dangerous situation. The present is different from the past. It would have been fine if there were no ancient era's rulers back then. But now, there are several ancient era's rulers holding down the fort. The martial epoch's strength is not enough to destroy them all. Prolonging their lives like this will only delay them for tens of millions of years. They might even besiege them. Qinzun also disagreed with Yi Shiwen's method. Extending the lives of the martial epoch was not difficult. However, extending the lives of the ancient epoch at its peak and when it was weak were two different things. The peak period was too short, but it was also the most glorious period. It was like youth and old age. How could the results be the same in the same year? Your worries are reasonable. However, I'm not planning to attack the other ancient epochs, as you think. Yi Shiwen said. He understood Qinzun and Middle Heavenly Venerate's concerns. They were afraid that Yi Shiwen would go crazy and let the martial epoch attack the other ancient epochs. Then, what do you plan to do? Qinzun could not help but feel doubtful. I recently comprehended a great technique and found a way to extend the lives of the martial epoch. Yi Shiwen said confidently, You don't need to destroy the ancient epoch to extend its lives. Both of them looked at Yi Shiwen in shock. They didn't know where he had obtained such a method. It wasn't that no one had done it before. However, the most they could do was to extend their lifespan for tens of millions of years. And that was obtained by destroying ancient eras. Yi Shiwen said indifferently, Both of you know that destroying the ancient epoch can extend the lives of the martial epoch. However, the reason is that after destroying the ancient epoch devoured the great Tao of this ancient epoch and perfected a portion of the martial epoch's great Tao, thus extending the lives of the ancient epoch. Actually, it is because the great Tao is not perfected. That is why the ancient epoch is born, grows old, gets sick, and dies. Just like ordinary creatures, why do they grow old, get sick, and die? It looks like they have never cultivated, but in reality, it is because their life essence is not perfect enough. The process of cultivation is a process of constantly perfecting one's life essence until one's life essence is perfected and one can live as long as heaven and earth. Cultivation is just a method, and the internal reason is because of the difference in life essence. Just like those living beings that were born at the beginning of the world, those living beings don't need to cultivate at all to be immortal beings. Yi Shiwen continued, "If you look at the ancient epic as a creature, you'll find that the more ancient the ancient epic, the shorter their lifespan is. The closer the ancient epic is to the martial epic, the longer their epic is. Isn't it like a process of continuous cultivation? The ancient epic that is born after the martial epic will inevitably absorb part of the martial epic's great technique. Their great Tao will be more perfect, and their lifespan will be longer. Just like ordinary creatures cultivating, each generation will be stronger than the previous one. In the end, all the great Tao will be perfected, and a perfect epic will appear. At that time, they will be immortal and no longer need to experience the pain of the epic changing. Isn't it like that? Whether it is a half-step ruler or a ruler, they're all trying their best to survive. Only by continuously surviving can they have a chance to wait for that perfect epic, the great Tao of eternal life." Yi Shiwen said, "When we extended the life of the martial epic and destroyed the ancient era, we were actually making up for the great Tao that the martial epic lacked. If I can make up for the great Tao of the martial epic, then the martial epic can naturally recover to its peak. This is the method I thought of to extend the life of the martial epic." The two of them listened and agreed. Previously, they did not think of such a deep level of things. If the epic was a process of the creature's evolution, then everything could be explained. The more great arts an era cultivates, the more great Taos they contain, and the more profound their skills will be. Naturally, they will live longer. In the end, they will be like ordinary living beings who prove their Tao, transcending the primal chaos and living for eternity. However, Qin Zun only paused for a moment and then said, "Although that is true, do you have a way to make up for the martial epic's heavenly Tao?" Qin Zun stared at Yi Shiwen with wide eyes. Is the gap between us already so big? He is still thinking of ways to comprehend the martial epic's great Tao and transcend. But Yi Shiwen can actually make up for the martial epic's great Tao. Such a gap was a gap in essence. I have indeed found a way. It is very risky, but even so, I do not want to see the martial epic slowly decline like this and then die. Yi Shiwen said slowly and firmly. Of course, the method he found was in the Tao character steel. In fact, many ancient epics' great Tao and great techniques could be found in it, and they were even very detailed. So, in theory, it could make up for the martial epic's great Tao. However, this was only in theory. Since ancient times, no one had ever succeeded in mending an epic's great Tao. In fact, no one had even tried. The difficulty of it was easy to imagine, far surpassing everyone's imagination. Even so, Yi Shiwen still wanted to give it a try. This even concerned his own advancement. The fundamental reason he could not advance was because the fortune creation heavenly monarch had seized the fortune of heaven and earth. He had absorbed all the essence of heaven and earth. Since the original essence was gone, Yi Shiwen would think of a way to increase the essence of heaven and earth. He would add in more essence of the ancient epic. This way, heaven and earth would allow breakthroughs again. That way, it will be possible for him to break through to the ruler realm. Chapter 38:51. Since the original pool had dried up and the water was gone, he would expand the pool and bring in more water so that it could grow. This was Yi Shiwen's plan. This plan was so grand that it scared Qin Zun and the Middle Heavenly Venerate. Even they were frightened by Yi Shiwen's idea. Using such a method to extend the martial epic's lifespan could be said to be unprecedented and unrepeatable. "How confident are you?" Qin Zun asked. "I have 50% confidence. I have been studying this method for many years, but I still don't have a 100% chance of success. But overall, I still have a considerable chance of success." Yi Shiwen said, "A 50% chance of success is worth a gamble." The Middle Heavenly Venerate said, "What help do you need? Just say it. As long as the Fortune God dynasty has it, you can take it." The Middle Heavenly Venerate naturally understood the meaning of Yi Shiwen extending the life of the martial epic. He also felt that he had reached a bottleneck. To him, it was like a fish that had been sucked out of the sea. The fortune god monarch alone had seized the fortune of heaven and earth. If Yi Shiwen could extend the life of the martial epic, then it was possible for them to make further breakthroughs. As long as they could make breakthroughs, he could give Yi Shiwen anything he wanted. There was nothing more important than breaking through. However, there's an even bigger problem here. Those ancient epics' rulers and heavenly monarchs, would they just watch as you extend the life of the martial epic? Qin Zun asked. That's right. That is indeed the case. The middle heavenly venerate suddenly thought of something and nodded. It should be known that those rulers of the ancient epics were waiting for the end of the martial epic. They spread the great Tao and seized the eternal matter of the martial epic to extend their lives. If they knew that Yi Shiwen wanted to extend the life of the martial epic, then they would definitely not let Yi Shiwen go. In the previous ancient epics, there might have been geniuses who could think of this step. But even if they could think of it, it would be useless because those rulers would definitely kill their ideas. I will not let them have the possibility of success. This is also the reason why I'm looking for you two Taoist friends. Those sovereigns certainly won't sit idly by and watch me succeed. When the time comes, I'm afraid that it will be an unprecedented battle. I hope that you two Taoist friends can protect me. I can't find the Lord of Good Fortune right now, so you two Taoist friends are the only people I can think of who can help me. Yi Shiwen said. Xiao Qian's smile contained some bitterness. This martial epic was truly filled with enemies. Normally, it was fine. However, during such a major event, the enemies of the martial epic would appear. However, there was nothing that could be done about it. As long as it was the current era, it would be targeted by the ancient era. There would be no other outcome. At this moment, the middle heavenly venerate took the lead and said, I'm fine with it. With the creation universe painting, I can block a ruler. Although it won't take long, fellow Taoist is planning for the entire martial epic. I have no reason to not support and help. I'll block one as well. Qin Zun also raised his hand and said, although I can't compare to fellow Taoists who can kill sovereigns and have yet to enter the sovereign realm, I think I can block one. After so many years, Qin Zun's cultivation did not remain stagnant. Although he still couldn't kill sovereigns like Yi Shiwen, he had no problem fighting sovereigns to a certain extent. Very well. With the help of the two Taoist friends, I am much more confident. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, we must do our best. I also don't want the martial epic to become the ancient epic. For ordinary beings, it would be a disaster. However, for us, it would be a disaster as well. Our path forward would be cut off, so we have no other choice but to fight. Yi Shiwen said with a resolute expression. You two should go back and prepare. After 10 years, I will start preparing to mend the sky. Yi Shiwen said slowly. After speaking, Qin Zun and the middle heavenly venerate disappeared from the divine court. They also had to prepare in advance. This battle was unavoidable. They had no other choice but to fight. However, since they were going to fight, they had to be prepared. This was the only advantage they had at the moment. They knew that Yi Shiwen was going to mend the sky, so they could prepare in advance. Then, Yi Shiwen also mobilized the power of the entire human race and arranged layer after layer of enchantments and array formations. Ever since Yi Shiwen had come into being, he had been shuttling back and forth in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, setting up barriers and arrays everywhere. No one knew what he wanted to do. In many people's opinion, Yi Shiwen wanted to strengthen the Fortune God Dynasty's foundation. The Fortune Heavenly Monarch had done something similar before. Many of the ancient formations and ancient barriers used by the Fortune God Dynasty were left behind by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. Yi Shiwen even shuttled to the era's battlefield and set up many arrays and barriers on the battlefield. Yi Shiwen's actions attracted the attention of the sovereigns. What is he doing? Is he still strengthening the martial epic's foundation at this time? But what's the use of this? The martial epic will be destroyed in a few 100 million years. What's the use of doing this now? It's just a struggle before death. Does he think this kind of arrangement will be of any use when the epic is destroyed? He's still young after all. He has never experienced the change of an epic, so he thinks this kind of method will be of no use. The sovereigns mocked Yi Shiwen wantonly. Yi Shiwen's youth was his most terrifying and prideful aspect, but at the same time, it was also his weakness. Because he was too young, he had not experienced many things. So in their opinion, Yi Shiwen was just struggling on his deathbed, which was very laughable. Yi Shiwen was dismissive. Only he knew what he was doing. He continued to set up one formation and barrier after another. In the blink of an eye, 10 years passed. Yi Shiwen had already spread his barriers and formations throughout the entire martial epic. Then, he returned to Mount Buzhou. Following that, everyone saw Yi Shiwen transform into a terrifying giant that was hundreds of millions of meters tall. His dermic world could be seen by the entire Fortune realm. Then, everyone saw Yi Shiwen chanting and continuously forming hand seals. Then, countless laws and great Daos flew out and entered the void. What is Martial Monarch doing? Many Fortune realm experts were shocked when they saw this scene. No one knew what Yi Shiwen was doing. Yi Shiwen's current actions looked somewhat strange. But soon, they discovered that the aura of death and destruction that densely covered the sky was gradually fading. The great Daos of the martial epoch that had started to gradually blur also started to gradually become clear. This feeling was like returning to the peak of the martial epoch. Many people were cheering. Over the years, the martial epoch had gradually declined. They were the ones who felt it the clearest. It could be said that they were slowly waiting for death. 4 half-step sovereigns, they would not die even if the epoch was destroyed. However, ordinary experts would die. Living as long as heaven and earth seemed very powerful. But if even heaven and earth died, what did they count for? Countless great Daos filled the void. Many people even felt their bodies sublimate when they saw these great Daos. Comprehending the Tao in a day, ascending to heaven in a day. This was the principle. As Yi Shiwen's great Daos spread out more and more merits descended from the sky. All of them landed on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was mending the great Daos of the martial epoch. Naturally, he had made a great contribution. The destruction of the ancient epoch did not result in any merit in itself. The true merit came after the destruction of the ancient epoch. The martial epoch swallowed up his great Tao, mending the martial epoch's heavenly Tao, which resulted in the descent of merit. Now, Yi Shiwen did not destroy the ancient epoch, but the effect was the same. Hence, all sorts of merits descended. The densely packed merits fell like rain. Everyone in the martial epoch was dumbfounded. They could only see the sky full of merits falling. Then, all of them entered Yi Shiwen's body and were collected by him. Many people could improve their cultivation by leaps and bounds if they obtained one. Even a regular heavenly venerate's cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. However, this was not enough for Yi Shiwen. The more, the better. If he wanted to break through to ruler in the future, he needed to create an atmosphere for the martial epoch. Creating an atmosphere for a breakthrough was only the first step. Following that, he needed to have the ability to break through. The golden light of merits was the most important part of this. The changes in the martial epoch finally attracted the attention of the heavenly venerates in the primal chaos. The martial epoch improved day by day. The declining situation actually turned for the better, gradually returning to its peak. How is this possible? How did he do it? He is actually mending the heavens. How can this be? If he succeeds once, won't there be a second time and a third time? If that happens, who could stop him? Won't the martial epoch exist forever? The martial epoch gradually recovered to its peak. Finally, the rulers and half-step rulers could no longer hold back. If Yi Shiwen succeeded, the consequences would be unimaginable. The martial epoch continued to prolong life. Then, the martial epoch's life forms would benefit the most. To them, their lifespans would be continuously wasted without doing anything. This was absolutely unacceptable. At this moment, after 81 years of mending the heavens, Yi Shiwen could no longer hold on. He vomited a mouthful of blood. In an instant, it seemed like 1 billion years had passed. His hair turned white, and wrinkles appeared on his face. The situation took a sudden turn for the worse. Chapter 38:52. Oh no, martial monarch is suffering from a backlash. Many people could tell that something was wrong. They could clearly tell that martial monarch was suffering from the backlash of the laws. Although it seemed easy for him to complete the martial epic's great Tao, it was actually not that easy. Otherwise, countless people would have done it already. However, in reality, only martial monarchs were doing this. Yi Shiwen vomited a mouthful of essence blood. The backlash this time was really ruthless. It could be said that it took hundreds of millions of years of his lifespan in one go. However, he was not discouraged at all. He knew that although the backlash of the laws was severe, it also deepened his understanding of the great Tao. Sometimes, if one walked the wrong path, one would be able to better understand what the right path was. Many people started to worry for him and pray for him. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was the pillar of the martial epic. If something happened to him, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, they could not help him. At that level, ordinary people could no longer understand an existence like Yi Shiwen. However, when many people looked at Yi Shiwen and saw that he still had white hair and wrinkles all over his body, they could not help but feel somewhat fearful. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, it could be said that his great Tao was extraordinary. Any kind of injury, even a Tao injury, could be healed with a thought. However, this time, he was injured by the laws, and even now, he still could not recover. The severity of the injury could be understood just by thinking about it. However, many people hoped that Yi Shiwen could succeed. At this moment, they already understood that Yi Shiwen was extending the life of the world. This was a shocking action. Since ancient times, no one had such boldness. It could be said to be unprecedented. If Yi Shiwen succeeded, then he could extend the life of the martial epic for many years. In fact, many people could not help but think that if he succeeded once, there might be a second time. In that case, wouldn't the martial epic exist forever? In that case, they would not have to die. They existed forever with the world, sharing the same lifespan as the world. As long as the world was not destroyed, they could exist forever. To them, surviving until the next epoch was unimaginable. They could only place their hopes on the martial epic lasting forever. All of a sudden, a terrifying giant hand reached out from the chaos, piercing through the Fortune Divine Dynasty's array formations and barriers. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's arrays and barriers came to life in an instant, turning into a terrifying attack that slammed into the giant hand. But none of them could stop this giant hand. This huge hand was too terrifying. It was completely condensed from the laws and was unprecedentedly powerful, surpassing any expert they had seen before. This big hand directly patted Yi Shiwen's body. Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly, and the power of this big hand turned into nothingness. Then, every pore on Yi Shiwen's body spurted out the principles of Sword Tao. The laws of Sword Tao instantly transformed into a gigantic sword that was tens of millions of meters long, which then slashed down fiercely on the huge hand. Rumble! The huge hand immediately exploded, turning into a blood mist that filled the sky and fell down, nourishing the martial epic's great Tao. If you want to kill me, show yourself. This method alone is not enough, Yi Shiwen said slowly. At this moment, many people understood that another ruler had interfered. Many people started to cry out in alarm. One could easily imagine how terrifying a ruler expert was. If Yi Shiwen had not stopped the previous time, that ruler alone would have been able to severely injure the martial epic. This time, although Yi Shiwen was still there, it was obvious that he was no longer at his peak. Obviously, the other party also knew this. In other words, they were waiting for the day when Yi Shiwen would be devoured by the rules before they made their move. The other party was a ruler expert, and he had been lying low for so many years, waiting for this moment. Could Yi Shiwen really survive? Many people could only hold their breaths and wait. They could not interfere in such a battle, so they could only choose to wait. At this moment, a person appeared in the primal chaos. However, this person was not a person, but an insect. It was just that this insect was exuding a world-shocking aura. It was able to stop the chaos by itself. It was incomparably domineering, and its entire body was surrounded by supreme divine light. But even so, everyone could still sense an unimaginably ferocious aura from it. Insect Lord. Yishiwen looked coldly at the insect. It was one of the rulers who returned from the mysterious place, the Insect Lord. He was the ancestor of the once glorious insect epoch, and could be called the first insect since the beginning of the world. It could even be said that all the famous insect experts of the insect epoch were his descendants. Even the terrifying insects like the heaven-swallowing insect, which could devour all epochs and worlds, were said to be closely related to him. When Yishiwen saw him, he already understood who the expert behind the heaven-swallowing divine lord was. It should be this insect lord. It could even be said that this insect lord was the mastermind behind all the epochs where the heaven-swallowing insect appeared. It had caused great harm to countless epochs, and there were even epochs that were destroyed because of it. It was easy to imagine the appearance of such a person. Even Yishiwen could not help but feel nervous. That's right, Martial Lord. Do you know what you are doing? You are going against the heavens. Even the heavens of your martial epoch cannot tolerate you, so you will suffer the backlash of the rules. The insect lord's eyes exuded a frightening and ferocious light as it stared at Yishiwen. It was as if it was looking at food rather than a person. Do you believe it? Yishiwen sneered, but he kept forming hand seals. His body continuously spewed out the great path laws, continuously replenishing the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. It was as if he did not care about the insect lord at all. You don't dare to come in, right? You are afraid that I will draw over the martial epoch's heavenly Tao and strike you down in one fell swoop. Yishiwen mocked as he looked at the insect lord. The insect lord was billions of kilometers long, like a long dragon in the primal chaos. Countless epochs had heard of his ferocious name. He could even mobilize an endless army of insect race to drown everything. Even so, he did not dare to enter the martial epoch. He could feel that the martial epoch's heavenly Tao did not weaken under Yishiwen's replenishment. Instead, it became stronger. Under normal circumstances, the martial epoch's heavenly Tao would not appear on its own. Unless the martial epoch's heavenly Tao was forced out by special means like the half-moon immortal lord did, it was impossible. However, this did not mean that the martial epoch's heavenly Tao was not dangerous. In fact, given Yishiwen's strength and position in the martial epoch, he could draw over the martial epoch's heavenly Tao and severely injure or even kill a ruler in one fell swoop. That was not a myth, but something that was possible. Although doing so would severely injure the martial epoch's heavenly Tao, the insect lord could not guarantee that Yishiwen would not dare to do so. When people were forced into a corner, they could do anything. It was not strange for them to do anything. Hence, he was planning and hesitating. Insect Lord, you can't kill me alone. You have to be prepared to be killed by me. If you have any tricks up your sleeves, use them all. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't have the chance to use them. Yishiwen's expression was still cold, and his words were cold and ruthless. Fellow Taoists, do you intend to let him continue being arrogant? The Insect Lord asked. Fellow Taoist Insect Lord, we can work together to kill this junior. He is too arrogant. Soon after, another deep and resounding voice came from the primal chaos. Along with this voice, a boundless sea of blood spread out and instantly drowned the entire primal chaos. A figure floated above this sea of blood. It was a figure that could only be vaguely seen as a human silhouette, but its body exuded a monstrous, ferocious might. Blood Lord. Yishiwen spat out the name of the person who had come. The supreme ruler of the Blood Tao epoch had once used his own strength to massacre a current epoch that did not have a ruler. He had turned that epoch into his own dojo. His might was monstrous and overflowing. He had once entered the eternal sacred land. It could be said that he was Yishiwen's natural enemy. Part of his great Tao had also been passed down in the martial epoch. Even Yishiwen had learned some of Bloodlord's great Tao. That's not enough. I can still defeat you with just the two of you. Yishiwen did not take Bloodlord seriously. There was even some disdain in his eyes. Yishuan was still old, and the circulation of his qi and blood was not smooth. However, he still looked down on the world and was the most terrifying existence in the world. What bold words! Fellow Taoist bug lord, since he is like a tortoise hiding in its shell, hiding under the protection of the martial epic, then let's break his shell first and destroy this so-called epic battlefield first. Then we will turn these countless creatures into our blood slaves and attack the martial epic. Bloodlord smiled coldly when he heard this, as if he was looking at a dead man. Right after Xiao Qin spoke, the boundless sea of blood spread out, directly drowning out the entire epic battlefield and swallowing up all the martial epic's life forms in the epic battlefield, turning them into blood slaves for Xiao Qin's use. Just at this moment, a green lotus instantly bloomed in the universe. It looked like the primal chaos green lotus during the creation of the world. It immediately blocked the boundless sea of blood. Chapter 38:53. A single green lotus blocked the sea of blood that filled the sky. The boundless green lotus bloomed in the primal chaos and absorbed all of the sea of blood. On this chaos green lotus, a figure stepped on this chaos green lotus and appeared in front of everyone. Who else could it be but Qin Zun? There's really no way to avoid this battle in the end. Qin Zun said with a sword in his hand. Another half-step ruler. Are the current half-step rulers so ignorant of the immensity of the heavens and earth? The Bloodlord glanced at Qin Zun. He didn't put Qin Zun in his eyes. After all, a half-step sovereign was only a half-step sovereign. It was rare to see someone who could cultivate to Yi Shiwen's level. It was impossible for a second one to appear. If miracles happened frequently, they would no longer be miracles but reality. Sigh, you guys came to the wrong place today. Qin Zun sighed and said slowly. In the next moment, a terrifying aura erupted from Qin Zun's body, shaking the entire chaos space. In the depths of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, inside the martial sect, endless power of faith surged out and rushed into Qin Zun's body. The surging power of faith caused Qin Zun's body to erupt with endless phenomenon. Purple qi came from the east, and auspicious qi soared into the chaos. Everyone was shocked by the changes in Qin Zun's body. It was unbelievable. Qin Zun was surrounded by 5 different types of divine beasts. The Qilin, azure dragon, vermilion bird, Xuanwu tortoise, and white tiger. They were all formed from the boundless power of faith. For millions upon millions of years, the power of faith had been condensed together, and this battle was completely manifested. Is this still Qin Zun? He's too powerful. How much power of faith is that? The Fortune God dynasty has been at its peak, and the martial sect has become one of the 3 holy lands. Now all this power is revealed in one go. It's too shocking. Many experts were dumbfounded watching this scene. Not only the Fortune Divine Dynasty's internal forces, but even the experts from the ancient era were shocked by Qin Zun's actions. Especially the Commandment Heavenly Lord, who was watching this scene from afar, was shocked. Initially, he thought that he and Qin Zun were evenly matched. Both of them had reached the peak of the half-step sovereign realm, and there was no way out. Yi Shiwen was already a miracle. He didn't think that anyone else could reach such a level. But now, Qin Zun had used his own strength to tell him that he was thinking too much. That step was indeed possible. Although it wasn't as big as Yi Shiwen's, it was still far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. How is this possible? He really did it. Only when he was truly at the pinnacle did he know how difficult it was to take that step. Either he could cross over and become a sovereign, or he couldn't cross over. For people like Qin Zun, taking half a step was the hardest part. As for Yi Shiwen, he had been completely ignored. From the very beginning, Yi Shiwen shouldn't have been included in their ranks because he was too strong. He was unimaginably strong. Now, do you still think that I don't have the ability to fight you? Qin Zun looked at Bloodlord and said. His gaze was extremely resolute. You condensed the power of faith over countless years into a single moment, allowing you to ascend. Unfortunately, that's all. No matter how powerful a half-step sovereign is, He is just a half-step sovereign. Bloodlord sighed. He still didn't take Qin Zun seriously. To him, Qin Zun was still far from being a half-step sovereign. Enough with the nonsense. Let's fight. Qin Zun stepped on his primal chaos green lotus and entered the primal chaos. Bloodlord only glanced at Qin Zun before following him into the depths of the primal chaos. In this place, none of them could bring out their full strength. Qin Zun was afraid that the entire epic battlefield would be destroyed if they fought. Bloodlord was also afraid that Qin Zun would move the martial epic's heavenly Tao's power if he was too close to the martial epic. Rumble! A horrifying explosion rang out. Many people could feel the horrifying explosions coming from the depths of the primal chaos. All sorts of mysterious phenomena of the Scarlet Sea and the primal chaos green lotus appeared and clashed. The primal chaos trembled slightly. Many people felt a shiver run down their spines. Many people understood that this was a clash between rulers. Although Qin Zun had barely reached that level, and he had relied on an endless amount of faith power, he had still reached that level. Humph! The Bug Lord sneered. Its huge body moved, intending to charge into the martial epic. To be more precise, it wanted to target Yi Shiwen. And just at this moment, a scroll flew out and grew bigger and bigger, as though it was an incomparably gigantic world. The Bug Lord rushed into the martial epic and was immediately sucked into the painting. The Creation Universe Scroll. It's the Creation Universe Scroll. Many people cried out in surprise. If this huge picture scroll wasn't the Creation Universe map, what else could it be? The Creation Universe Scroll sucked the Bug Lord into it. The Insect Lord immediately roared. Its terrifying body kept twisting in the Universe Creation map. Every time it twisted, the Universe Creation map would create a scene of destruction. It was earth-shattering, and mountains and rivers would collapse. Are you trying to stop me? Wishful thinking. The Bug Lord snorted coldly. It felt ridiculous. It was a sovereign. How could it be destroyed by the Creation Universe Scroll? It was even difficult for the Creation Universe Scroll to trap it. After all, it was not a half-step sovereign. It could not be easily defeated by the Creation Universe Scroll. Just at this moment, a figure appeared. Who else could it be but the Middle Heavenly Venerate? At this moment, the Middle Heavenly Venerate formed hand seals and used the Creation Universe Scroll to block the Bug Lord. Behind him, countless power of faith and endless spiritual energy surged into his body, allowing him to withstand the consumption of the universe map of creation. Martial Lord, I can help you stop it, but not for long. The rest is up to you. The Middle Heavenly Venerate said. In order to stop the Bug Lord, he had already done his best. With the strength of a half-step sovereign, this was the most he could do. Yi Shiwen nodded. He was also constantly forming hand seals to complete the martial epic's great way. His expression became more solemn. Now Qin Zun and the Middle Heavenly Venerate had blocked everything for him. Martial Lord, this is a heaven-defying move. It is impossible to succeed. An extremely cold voice emerged from the chaos. Suddenly, a ball of flames emerged from within the primal chaos, and then it transformed into a human figure. Mythical Fire, Era's Mythical Fire Heaven Monarch. Yi Shiwen looked at the figure in front of him and said, I didn't expect 3 sovereigns to be sent to kill me. What a big move. I still don't think this is enough. After I kill Martial Lord, I only want his body to be refined into a puppet. You can take the rest. Another terrifying voice rang out from the chaos. It was a person who looked like a puppet. He looked extremely old, as if he had been ravaged by time. However, he had a terrifying aura that a puppet could not have. Compared to the Mythical Fire Heaven Monarch, he was not inferior at all. The Puppet Era's Puppet Heaven Monarch. Ha, they actually sent 4 experts. Yi Shiwen burst into laughter. A sneer flashed across the corner of his mouth, as if he was mocking the 2 of them. You've dispatched the 4 great sovereigns to deal with me. How scared are you of me? Even though I'm in such a state, you're still worried that the Heavenly Monarch of Inferno can kill me alone? Yi Shiwen looked at the Puppet Lord of Heaven and said. The Puppet Heaven Monarch was not angry. He just said faintly, The sound of wood colliding was extremely horrifying. It is just to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Since we have decided to attack someone like you, we must do our best to avoid any repercussions. So once we attack, you will die. The puppet heaven monarch's words were cold and ruthless. However, he was still very afraid of Yishuan. After all, Yishuan's achievements were too glorious. He, a sovereign, had never killed someone at the same level as him. However, Yishuan, a half-step sovereign, had done it more than once. It was not an exaggeration to take such a person seriously. Is there no one else? If there is anyone else, we can attack together, Yishuan said faintly. It seemed that he did not care about the puppet heaven monarch and the mythical fire heaven monarch. The two of us are enough. The mythical fire heaven monarch stepped forward and said, "Since there are only 4 of you left, let me kill all of you," Yishuan shouted. Endless killing intent was released from between his eyebrows. His body was burning. In an instant, it was burning to the extreme. He was unprecedentedly powerful. Kill us? Ha ha. Martial Monarch, I think you are crazy. Even if you were at your peak, you would not be able to do it, let alone now. The taste of the law's backlash is not good, right? How long do you think you can maintain this peak state? The puppet heaven monarch laughed strangely. He looked at Yishuan as if he was looking at a pitiful worm. He was just a person struggling on the verge of death. It is enough to kill all of you. For the martial epoch, all of you are a great threat. Today, I can kill 4 sovereigns. Great. Yishuan laughed loudly. His eyes were as vast as the stars, and his expression was extremely firm. Suddenly, his body finally moved. Chapter 38:54. As Yishuan spoke, he moved directly towards the direction of the puppet heavenly monarch to kill. His movements were too fast. He was clearly still in the fortune realm a moment ago, but in the next moment, he had already appeared in the chaos. He had already burned the law of speed to the extreme and utilized it to the extreme. The puppet heavenly lord let out a long roar, and his body emitted the light of chaos. At this moment, his big hand suddenly stretched out and bombarded towards Yishuan on the spot. The entire chaos burst open, and the river of time could also be seen. It was directly shattered by the bombardment, and the huge hand suddenly swept out with a terrifying flow of time. This big hand directly smashed Yishuan's attack, and then its momentum did not decrease, and directly grabbed Yishuan's body. Bang! Bang! This big hand collided with Yishuan's body, and a burst of sound similar to the sound of gold and iron colliding with each other. This attack did not even shake Yishuan's body. He just looked at the puppet heavenly lord indifferently. He could see that the terrifying thing about the puppet heavenly lord was that he had refined his body into a puppet, and it was already at the level of a Dominator Dao tool. Therefore, there was almost no weakness on his body, and it was precisely because of this that he dared to confront Yishuan head-on. Although he could not hurt Yishuan, the puppet heavenly lord was not the slightest bit discouraged. He just laughed strangely and said, "Kaka, martial monarch, you are only at this level, and you still dare to say that you want to kill me? This is really ridiculous. Do you think that is possible? Do you think that this is all I have? You are too naive. Today, I will kill you first." Yishuan shouted. His white hair fluttered in the chaos, and his chi and blood boiled to the peak. On his body, the martial honorable seal suddenly flew out, grew bigger and bigger, and then suppressed towards the mythical fire heavenly lord. He did not really want to kill the mythical fire heavenly lord, but merely wanted to stop him and not let him intervene. Dealing with one dominator and dealing with 2 dominators were 2 completely different concepts. The fire heavenly monarch roared. He wanted to send the martial sovereign seal flying, not letting it stop him. However, the martial sovereign seal had been tempered by Lin Fan and was now a true sovereign Dao treasure. It was impossible to kill the blazing fire heavenly monarch with its own power, but it was still easy for it to stop him. Do you think that stopping the Inferno heavenly monarch will work? The puppet heavenly monarch sneered. Suddenly, Yishuan felt that his body wasn't listening to him. He opened his heavenly eye and saw that his body was covered with the principles of the Great Way. These principles of the Great Way turned into lines that hung down from the void and attached to the surface of his body. They affected and controlled his movements, turning him into a marionette. He was at the mercy of the puppet Heavenly Lord. Insignificant skill. Yi Shiwen sneered, and the endless vitality in his body rose up, directly dispersing the lines formed by the principles of the Great Way. They could no longer affect him. However, at this time, the puppet Heavenly Lord had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen and unleashed a punch. It was another peerless martial art, unimaginable. One punch destroyed the universe, and an unimaginable scene was born. Yi Shiwen was fearless and took a step forward and slapped down with his palm. Cosmic Creation Palm. Yi Shiwen's palm slapped down, and in an instant it hit the fist, and a huge explosion was heard. The puppet Heavenly Lord screamed, and his figure retreated tens of millions of miles, directly tearing a huge crack in the chaos. His body, which had been refined into a puppet, was broken in many places. How could this be? Your vitality shouldn't be this strong. We specifically chose to attack you when you're severely injured and frail. There's no way we could have made a mistake. The puppet Heavenly Monarch said in disbelief. His eyes were full of disbelief because he had calculated that under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen shouldn't be able to use his best combat skills. In the martial arts era, martial arts were the best, and the best was hand-to-hand combat. Not only was the body strong, but also the martial arts that relied on the strength of the body had reached the peak. However, in order to use these martial skills, one must have a strong qi and blood. As the saying goes, the fist is afraid of the young and strong. This truth was applicable everywhere. Yi Shiwen was no longer in his peak state, so it was reasonable to say that it was impossible for him to have such a formidable hand-to-hand combat ability. Even if he forcibly increased his vitality, old and weak were still old and weak. This was an undeniable and unavoidable problem. Yes, I'm old and weak, so I might not be able to kill you like this, Yi Shiwen said with a cold smile. How much did I pay to lure you out? As Yi Shiwen said, his hair turned black, and the wrinkles on his face disappeared. In a short time, he had returned to his peak state. His whole body was shrouded in immortal light, and countless golden lights of virtue flew out, forming millions of divine rainbows. Impossible! You suffered from the backlash of the rules. This kind of injury can't be faked. The puppet lord's eyes widened, still in disbelief. He didn't believe that he was wrong. Moreover, he was the only one who was wrong. It was impossible for all four rulers to be wrong. Of course, this injury can't be faked, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Of course, the injury on his body was not faked. Faked injuries could not fool peerless experts like the Puppet Lord and the Bug Lord. So his injury was real, but it could not be healed. He had absorbed so much golden lights of virtue, so he could naturally heal his injury. However, he had not chosen to recover. He was waiting for such an opportunity. This was a trap that he had set up to draw the sovereigns over to him. To Shao Chun, those rulers were like venomous bugs, existences that could threaten the martial epic at any time. However, they hid in the primal chaos and could not attack them. Hence, Shao Chun had to think of a way to force those rulers out or lure them out. He knew that those rulers were afraid of his combat strength, so they would not make a move easily. After all, he had killed the Heavenly Lord Yama and the Storm Heavenly Lord, and so many years had passed. They probably didn't know what kind of strength they had. However, Yi Shiwen did not want to let these poisonous snakes in the darkness go. He might as well lure them over and kill them in one go. 4 rulers was enough to reduce a lot of future troubles for the martial epic. The backlash from the natural laws was real, and his attempt to mend the heavens was also real. If it worked, that would be for the best. If it didn't, he would use it as a prelude to draw the sovereigns over and kill them. These rulers of the ancient epochs would stir up trouble every time the world changed. They could be said to be the natural enemies of the current epoch, so Yi Shiwen had to be careful. However, you are too confident. Even if you are not severely injured and on the verge of death, do you think you have any chance of winning against the four of us? The puppet Heavenly Lord's injuries healed rapidly. Although Yi Shiwen had caught him off guard and caused him to suffer, given his accumulations, he would not die just like that. How would you know if you don't try? Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile. You are just a half-step ruler, and yet you dare to scheme against us four rulers. You are finished. We will definitely tear you to pieces and grind your bones to dust. The hot-tempered leaf fire Heavenly Lord roared. He could no longer hold back. Say that if you can survive. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at the leaf fire Heavenly Lord before charging at the puppet Heavenly Lord. Countless divine lights flew out of Yi Shiwen's body and turned into a terrifying tide. Every ray of light could tear the chaos and severely damage a world. On the other hand, the puppet Heavenly Monarch wasn't to be outdone, and he pounced over from afar. This time, he didn't hold back any longer, and he used his body as a means of attack. His fists actually emanated a myriad of strands of immortal light, and then he attacked Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 The puppet Heavenly Lord's fists collided with Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm. It was as if two worlds were colliding. The clanging sound could break the endless galaxy. The boundless chaos collapsed silently and was destroyed. It looked extremely terrifying from afar. Both sides fought faster and faster. The divine lights on their bodies continued to tear the chaos. Just when everyone thought that the puppet Heavenly Lord could confront Yi Shiwen head-on, suddenly, the puppet Heavenly Monarch let out a shrill cry, and then his arms that he'd been attacking ceaselessly had actually exploded in midair. In fact, he had already suffered a big loss in the previous collision with Yi Shiwen. However, he did not dare to stop, because if he stopped, it would not be as simple as suffering a big loss. And these injuries condensed and gathered together, causing him to completely explode. It was too fierce. In a head-on hand-to-hand combat, no one was a match for Yi Shiwen. The gap was too big. The puppet Heavenly Lord's feeling was right. He could not stop, because the moment he was blasted away, Yi Shiwen's next attack had already arrived. Yi Shiwen's big hand suddenly fell down as if it was chopping a coffin. The puppet Heavenly Lord's body, which had been refined into a Dominator Dao tool, was slapped by this hand. It exploded on the spot and shook the entire chaos. In an endless amount of time, the spatial storm surged in reverse. This large hand pierced through the puppet Heavenly Monarch, instantly killing him. It had not been long since the start of the battle, but the puppet Heavenly Lord had fallen. Countless people were terrified, but there were also countless people who were cheering. Chapter 3855. Of course, the ancient eras in the primal chaos were terrified. Yi Shiwen killed the puppet Heavenly Monarch as if he was slaughtering chickens and dogs. It was simply terrifying. It was as if they had seen the birth of another peerless killing god. However, the experts of the Fortune God dynasty were extremely excited when they saw Yi Shiwen's amazing performance. With the protection of such a matchless god of war, how could they not prosper? Especially when the martial arts era was going downhill and getting weaker and weaker. Yi Shiwen was like a stabilizing force, stabilizing everyone's panic and uneasiness. After Yi Shiwen killed the puppet Heavenly Monarch with one strike, he collected his corpse. Although his entire body was a puppet and not flesh and blood, the world tree had a way to absorb it. Not only did it absorb flesh and blood, but it also absorbed the laws of these rulers to continuously improve the laws of the world tree. You lured us here so that you could defeat us one by one. If you take the initiative to attack, I'm afraid you won't have the chance to defeat us one by one. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch blasted away the martial sovereign seal with one hand. It was extremely domineering, but could not change the overall situation. Yi Shiwen had already killed the puppet Heavenly Monarch. As Yi Shiwen said before, this was the overall situation. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch already understood Yi Shiwen's plan. If Yi Shiwen took the initiative to attack, then the rulers would join forces. At that time, no matter how strong Yi Shiwen was, he would not be able to kill all four of them. This was because in the depths of the primal chaos, Qin Zun and the Middle Heavenly Venerables would find it difficult to mobilize the power of faith, let alone stop any of the rulers. At that time, Yi Shiwen would truly become a loner, and he would have to face the siege of 4 people by himself. However, it was different in the martial Dao era. They were worried that Yi Shiwen would attract the martial Dao era's heavenly Dao to kill them. Most of the time, their hands and feet were tied, which was why they fell into Yi Shiwen's trap. "You really schemed well," the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch said coldly as he looked at Yi Shiwen. However, there was no point in saying all this now. "If not for you all eyeing the martial epic covetously, wanting to destroy my martial epic at all times, I would not have to do this," Yi Shiwen said. It seemed like he had succeeded in this scheme, but only he knew how much he had to pay. The backlash of the rules wasn't easy to bear. In fact, if one's cultivation was slightly weaker, an ordinary half-step ruler would have died from the backlash. You are defying the heavens. Do you think you can save the martial epic? You are standing against everyone. No one will let you continue like this. When the time comes, the rulers of that mysterious place will come out one after another. Do you think you have a chance of winning? Leaf Fire Heavenly Monarch said loudly. Yi Shiwen's move was equivalent to going against all the rulers of the ancient era. One was already terrifying enough, let alone so many people. Some things have to be done. Even if there are millions of people, I still have to do it. Yi Shiwen sighed and stood with his hands behind his back. Don't make it sound so noble. What we are doing is just to stay alive and wait for the arrival of a flawless era. We are waiting for that eternity. You are doing this just to stay alive, Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch said without giving him any face. That's right. In order to survive, no matter how many of you stand in front of me, no matter how many people say that I'm wrong, I will not retreat. Not only me, I will also protect my family, my everything. Have you ever thought that instead of waiting for the so-called flawless era to come, why not create it yourself? With so many rulers working together, I don't believe we can't create such an era, Yi Shiwen said as he looked at the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch's body trembled slightly. He seemed to be stunned by Yi Shiwen's boldness. To create such a flawless era without relying on others was a shocking idea. It's too late. We have already gone too far on this path. Our paths are different. We can't work together. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch was also very tempted, but he could only give up in the end. Different paths were enough to explain everything. If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Die! Yi Shiwen roared and took a step forward. Suddenly, he turned into a divine rainbow, penetrated the chaotic universe, and directly rushed to the front of the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch also roared. He wanted to fight to the death with Yi Shiwen. Endless divine flames were burning around him. They soared like fire dragons and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen also clenched his fist and punched out. Bang! 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 There was a loud roar. Yi Shiwen directly blew up these fire dragons, and then rushed to the front of the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch. He directly punched on the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch's body. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch spat out a mouthful of blood. It turned into a sky full of flames and burned in the chaos. The momentum of Yi Shiwen's fist did not decrease. It continuously bombarded on the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch's body. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch's body was covered in blood, and the chaos was surging. The whole scene was extremely shocking. The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch wanted to struggle. However, it was obvious that it was not enough in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's attack was completely overwhelming. In terms of cultivation and realm, there was no way for him to compare with the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch. Therefore, he did not consider suppressing in this aspect. However, his fleshly body, forged from the golden light of karmic virtue, was simply too powerful. He was able to crush even a sovereign. Boom! The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch was hit by Yi Shiwen again. He flew out on the spot and was blasted into the chaos. A huge crack appeared in the chaos. Puff! The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch spat out another mouthful of blood. The blood was mixed with his great path and his origin. They were all blasted out by Yi Shiwen's punch. I'm not willing. I'm not willing. The Inferno Heaven Monarch let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body was enlarging. His Dharma idol was also very terrifying. It was a mass of primal chaos flames, where his origin was located. He wanted to burn Yi Shiwen alive. However, Yi Shiwen was not afraid at all. He reached out with his palm and penetrated the mass of chaotic fire. Then, he grabbed the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch spirit. Bang! The Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch spirit was crushed by Yi Shiwen on the spot. He could not fight back at all. Another ruler had fallen. Everyone was stunned by this terrifying, killing efficiency. A ruler might not even be born in an era, but he died in Yi Shiwen's hands just like that. He could not fight back at all. Had the current Yi Shiwen really become so powerful? No wonder those rulers did not dare to take the initiative to attack Yi Shiwen. With such terrifying combat strength, those rulers had to be careful when facing Yi Shiwen. This was absolutely right. Just as everyone was shocked, suddenly, another extremely fierce aura was awakened in the chaos. Everyone looked and saw that it was the insect lord who had rushed out of the universe creation map. The middle heavenly master could not stop the insect lord at all. As he had said before, he could only barely delay Yi Shiwen for a short period of time. After all, his skills were obviously far inferior to Yi Shiwen and Qin Zun. At this time, he vomited blood and retreated into the creation domain. However, there was no panic on his face. He had seen how Yi Shiwen killed the Leaf Fire Heaven Monarch and the Puppet Heaven Monarch. In his opinion, there would be no problem for him to protect himself this time. In contrast to the Middle Heavenly Venerate, Insect Lord, who had just rushed out of the Creation Universe map, was stunned. Although he had not been trapped in the Creation Universe map for a long time, he had indeed been stunned. Therefore, he did not know that the Puppet Heavenly Monarch and the Inferno Heavenly Monarch had fallen. However, as soon as he came out, he could feel the will of heaven and earth. He could even feel that the nomological laws of the two rulers had not dissipated yet. There was actually a sense of sadness. That was the will of heaven and earth. You actually killed the two of them. The insect lord looked at Yi Shiwen in front of him, dumbfounded, as if he did not recognize him. That's right. You will be the same next. There will be no difference. Yi Shiwen's voice was extremely cold. How dare you? The bug lord let out a long howl. At some point, the entire primordial chaos had become filled with an endless sea of bugs, devouring everything in its path. Even primordial chaos energy was devoured by them, and they used this method to traverse the chaos verse. This endless sea of insects could even destroy an entire era civilization. In the chaos, there was no one who did not fear them. Child's play. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and immediately spat out endless chaotic flames. These endless sea of insects were burned to ashes in an instant. Not a single trace of them remained. Just as Yi Shiwen burned the sea of insects to death, suddenly, an incomparably huge insect head emerged from the chaos. Then, it opened its terrifying bloody mouth that could easily swallow a world and bit towards Yi Shiwen. It wanted to bite Yi Shiwen to death while he was alive. However, Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry. With a twist of his body and a side kick, his leg swept out like a pillar that supported the sky. The entire chaos was torn into a huge crack, and then Yi Shiwen's leg directly blasted on the head of the insect lord. Boom! The insect lord's head was directly smashed by Yi Shiwen's kick. Countless pieces of flesh and blood splattered, and its unimaginably huge body also flew out in the chaos, retreating repeatedly. It was just one blow, and the insect lord was seriously injured. The insect lord did not see the battle between Yi Shiwen and the other two heaven lords. Otherwise, it would not have dared to fight with Yi Shiwen so carelessly. His gigantic body didn't have any effect at all. Chapter 38:56. The insect lord had already suffered a great loss in just a short period of time. The insect lord did not pay much attention to Yi Shiwen. In other words, it did not have an objective understanding of Yi Shiwen's current strength. The insect lord did not see it when Yi Shiwen killed the Puppet Heaven Lord and the Inferno Heaven Lord. Therefore, its entire head was blown up by Yi Shiwen. The insect lord retreated again and again after suffering such a huge loss. Then it grew another head in the chaos. When it looked at Yi Shiwen, its eyes were full of fear. If it had not figured out Yi Shiwen's strength in the beginning, then it had now completely understood how terrifying Yi Shiwen was. Step by step, Yi Shiwen walked towards the insect lord. Every step he took covered millions of miles. His speed was astonishing, but he seemed to be so calm and relaxed. His movements were extremely fast. In an instant, he crushed in the direction of the insect lord. That terrifying aura directly blew up the chaos. No one could imagine how someone could be so powerful. The insect lord roared and soared up like a soaring azure dragon. It stirred up the entire chaos. Around its body, the entire space and time were distorted. Beams of terrifying chaotic light shot out and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. The insect lord's attacks were more terrifying than the previous. They could shatter the chaos and were as thick as a galaxy. The world was shocked. However, Yi Shiwen was not afraid at all. He simply took a step forward and blasted out a punch. Boom, boom, boom. No matter how many tricks the insect lord had up its sleeves, it seemed to be nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen just used his bare hands to blow them up casually. He approached the insect lord step by step and rushed in front of it. Yi Shiwen raised his right hand and raised his palm toward the sky. Then, the revered martial seal suddenly flew out with a whooshing sound. Then, it started to revolve. It seemed as if a galaxy had been condensed into this revered martial seal. Then, an inexhaustible radiance of martial arts blossomed out and suddenly suppressed everything. Boom! A mass of light exploded from the chaos. With the point of collision as the core, it directly swept in all directions. This attack directly pierced through the entire chaos, creating a terrifying bottomless hole. Even if the chaos chi filled it up, it would be of no use because it would be constantly devoured by this hole. Roar! A huge and terrifying roar erupted from the chaos. Then, a figure surged in the chaos. Who else could it be but Insect Lord? Everyone finally saw that the Insect Lord's head had been smashed off in the chaos. There was a huge hole on his head, which was caused by Yi Shiwen's martial venerable seal. The martial sovereign seal was a virtuous sacred artifact, so one could imagine how hard it was. The Bug Lord had suffered a great loss when it had clashed head-on with it. Yi Shiwen's killing intention was boiling even more. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said, "Today, I will kill all of you." His expression was incomparably confident. He stood proudly in the world and looked disdainfully at all times. No one had ever been able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. A half-step sovereign had slaughtered a sovereign. There had never been such a person since ancient times. At this moment, no one would take Yi Shiwen's claim of killing the 4 sovereigns as a joke anymore. He indeed had the ability and strength to do so. At this moment, the Insect Lord suddenly moved. In the distant chaos, the Insect Tao era emitted hundreds of millions of rays of light, covering the sky and covering the earth. In an instant, the Insect Tao era had already appeared in front of Yi Shiwen, and then it suppressed Yi Shiwen. You actually refined the Insect Tao era into your Sovereign Tao artifact. Yi Shiwen's eyes flashed as he said. He had seen all sorts of Tao items, including Sovereign Tao items. There were also Tao items like the Fortune of the Universe Scroll, which could project mountains and rivers into the Fortune of the Universe Scroll, and then use the projection of the Fortune world to attack opponents. But to refine an entire epic into a Sovereign Tao item was a terrifying thing to think about. The Insect Lord devoured the heavens and the earth, devouring everything. In the end, he also devoured the heavenly Tao of their era. Only then could he turn the Insect Tao era into his Sovereign Tao artifact. This was very terrifying. In terms of power, it was even above the average Sovereign Tao artifact. However, the Insect Tao era was also the lair of the Insect Lord. Under normal circumstances, it would not be used easily. However, at this time, he was already forced into a dead end by Yi Shiwen. He could not care so much anymore. The power of the insect Tao era could be imagined. Even if it was just an ancient era, its power was still very terrifying. The insect lord had gone through several eras to slowly devour it before he finally succeeded. Boom! This attack finally forced Yi Shiwen to retreat. Countless insect Tao armies poured over like quicksilver, sweeping over majestically. The insect Tao era was like a longworm. It opened its bloody mouth and wanted to devour Yi Shiwen in one breath. And at this moment, Yi Shiwen sneered slightly. It was unknown when he had condensed the sword Tao law in his hand. With a sweep of his sword, it was as if a galaxy had been swept out. The sword aura surged and rushed out directly. The majestic army that had rushed over was swept into nothingness on the spot. Even the insect path epic's gaping maw was blocked. However, such a block only lasted for a moment. In an instant, an endless army rushed out. It was an extremely terrifying army. Some of the insects were even as long as a galaxy. It was extremely terrifying. The smallest ones were as huge as a mountain. At this time, densely packed like locusts swept out. You will never be able to kill me. Ha ha ha. The insect lord let out a long roar. His injuries were recovering. After using the insect Tao era, he finally had a chance to catch his breath. He would not be forced to death by Yi Shiwen on the spot. Yi Shiwen could also tell that as long as the insect Tao era existed, these insect Tao armies would emerge continuously. Fabricating life out of thin air was simply unimaginable for ordinary people. However, for an era, it was just an ordinary method. In that case, I'll destroy your insect path epic first. As Yi Shiwen spoke, he muttered an incantation. Immortal light surged from all over his body, illuminating the entire primal chaos. Waves of terrifying aura surged into his body. That was the will of the martial epic's heavenly way. With Yi Shiwen's help, all of it surged into his body, giving him the blessing of the epic. He had made countless contributions to the martial epic. Therefore, his connection with the martial epic was getting closer. It could even be said that he was tied to the same chariot. Therefore, he could easily mobilize the martial epic's heavenly ways will. This was also what the sovereigns and heavenly monarchs feared the most. They would rather fight in the chaos than enter the fortune god dynasty. Yi Shiwen stretched out a huge hand and suddenly slapped the insect Tao era. Rumble. Yi Shiwen's slap directly created a huge hole in the insect Tao era. How is this possible? The insect lord exclaimed in disbelief. His insect Tao era was refined into a sovereign Tao artifact. How could it be so easily pierced and heavily injured? However, the truth was right in front of him. However, he immediately laughed sinisterly. The huge and horrifying face revealed a sinister smile. The insect Tao era that was pierced by Yi Shiwen's hand turned into a horrifying huge insect and swallowed Yi Shiwen. Martial monarch. Many people in the fortune god dynasty exclaimed. They only saw Yi Shiwen being swallowed by the horrifying huge insect that the insect Tao era had turned into. That scene was simply too horrifying. However, while they were still exclaiming, a ray of light burst out from the depths of the horrifying huge insect. It was as if a ray of light had torn the sky full of darkness. Then a second ray, a third ray, a fourth ray, until countless rays of light burst out from the depths of the huge insect. These rays of light were like countless pairs of huge hands that directly tore the horrifying huge insect apart. Immediately after, an even more horrifying aura descended. That was a martial epic's heavenly Tao's will, which directly enveloped this horrifying huge insect. Everyone only saw this horrifying huge insect's body crumbling bit by bit, revealing its original appearance. That was the insect Tao era. The insect Tao era was collapsing. Everywhere was collapsing. The original insect Tao era's heavenly Tao was entangled with the martial epic's heavenly Tao. Since the insect lord could swallow the insect Tao era's heavenly Tao. Naturally, it was not that strong. How could it block the martial epic's heavenly Tao? In just a moment, it was completely devoured. Then, everyone saw a scene like the end of the world. The entire insect Tao era collapsed. Countless insects died miserably. There were all kinds of them. Many of them had evolved to a very high level and had already evolved into insect people. However, it was useless. Before such a great calamity, no one could resist it. Among them, there were sovereign emperors and heavenly venerate level insects that tried to rush out. However, the moment they rushed out, Yi Shiwen slapped them to death. In front of Yi Shiwen, they had no chance of escaping. Yi Shiwen's figure shuttled through the insect Tao era. In the depths of the insect Tao era, a huge insect appeared in front of him. It was the insect lord. However, at this moment, the insect lord was in an extremely sorry state. There were all sorts of wounds all over his body. He had devoured the insect Tao era and merged with it. Naturally, he would benefit a lot if the insect Tao era was fine. However, if something happened to the insect Tao era, he would be severely injured as well. Chapter 38:57. As the insect path epic continued to be severely injured, devoured, and collapsed, huge wounds appeared on the insect lord's body. It was as if someone was cutting his body with a saber. This was the price he had to bear. He chose to devour the insect path epic, so he naturally had to bear the backlash. This was a very normal thing in itself. Take Yi Shiwen, for example. Since he chose to get closer to the martial epic, he had to bear the consequences of the martial epic's decline or even destruction. This was also an important reason why he desperately wanted to prolong the martial epic's life. At his level, he could be said to have no control over himself. Hence, he understood the predicament the insect lord was facing. Every time the insect path epic collapsed, a portion of the damage would be transferred to him. However, it was impossible to kill the insect lord by destroying the insect path epic. After all, the insect lord was an independent entity. It could only severely injure or even kill the insect lord. However, it was impossible to kill the insect lord directly. The insect lord felt that his physical body was collapsing, and his spirit was also collapsing. His body was filled with scenes of destruction. It was extremely horrifying. All of this was within his expectations. He rarely used it because he knew that there was such a risk. But now, he had no other choice. He could only fight Yi Shiwen to the death. And now, it was finally time for the counterattack. How could he dare to stay in front of Yi Shiwen? Even if he was at his peak, he could not defeat Yi Shiwen, let alone now. However, when he wanted to escape, he discovered that the entire space in the chaos had been sealed by someone. Obviously, there was no one else but Yi Shiwen who would do such a thing. In the next instant, Yi Shiwen had already arrived in front of him. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen roared. Each punch was like an azure dragon, flickering with billions of rays of light in the primal chaos, directly blasting the insect lord's body. The insect lord could not resist at all, or rather, there was no place for him to escape. He did not have time to break through the spatial boundary that Yi Shiwen set up. Bang! Insect lord's body was blasted away. This time, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. His physical body was already on the verge of collapsing. He tried so hard to suppress it, but now he finally couldn't hold it any longer and collapsed. The insect lord's body suddenly dispersed and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. His body had just recondensed, and then he only saw Yi Shiwen's fist coming down again. Bang! His body exploded once again. It was extremely tragic. Every time his body regrew, Yi Shiwen would kill him. I can't accept this. The insect lord let out a deafening roar and looked at Yi Shiwen with its huge eyes. That was the ultimate despair. As it roared, the flesh and blood of its entire body burned. Everyone could even feel a kind of sorrow in the entire universe. That was the sorrow of chaos for the insect lord. The bug lord, who had been forced to his limits, burned all of his flesh and blood to unleash a terrifying attack. This was the final attack of a ruler, as well as his most terrifying attack. It was simply too terrifying. Rumble. The entire chaos was swept away, revealing a huge scar. It was a crack that seemed to have existed since ancient times. The power of time lost its effect on this crack. Yishuan couldn't dodge it. This attack directly blasted towards the martial epic. If Yishuan didn't block it, the entire martial epic would be severely injured. After all, this was the final attack of a ruler, and it burned all of its life essence. Yishuan didn't dodge. He waved his hand suddenly, and a scroll fell from the sky. It was the universe creation scroll. Yishuan pinched a seal, and the universe creation scroll grew bigger and bigger. In just an instant, it had turned into the size of a world. Rumble. The insect lord's final attack directly swept out and blasted into the universe creation scroll. Rumble. Countless cosmos, mountains, and rivers in the universe creation scroll were all destroyed. This terrifying attack seemed like the end of the world. If it wasn't for the universe creation scroll blocking it, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, even if it was the Good Fortune universe map, it was still a bit difficult to block such an attack. Seeing that it was about to be pierced by this attack, Yishuan made his move. His big hand grabbed the Good Fortune universe map. Yishuan's big hand was like order. Wherever the big hand grabbed, the order and the rules would be stabilized. Then he grabbed the energy of the blood essence and crushed it in an instant. This attack was considered to have completely disappeared. I can't accept this. Ah! The insect lord roared. Its body exploded and its soul was completely set on fire. All it saw was that its final attack had failed in the end. It was blocked by the universe creation scroll and Yishuan. It was unwilling to accept that its final attack couldn't even cause any trouble to Yishuan. Yishuan hurriedly reached out with one hand and grabbed the remaining flesh of the insect lord in his hand. It was just that most of the energy and laws contained in the insect lord's flesh had been burned after this attack. Its value was already greatly reduced. However, Yishuan didn't say much. He just put the huge body of the insect lord into his inner world. Another one died. The insect lord didn't just die by himself. He buried the insect, Tao, epic together. Another ancient era has been destroyed. Another inheritance has been destroyed. It can't be considered destroyed. The insect Tao epic was devoured by the martial Tao epic. The insect Tao epic civilization will definitely be reborn in the martial Tao epic. Countless people looked at Yishuan in shock. The martial Tao epic was besieged by 4 dominators. How dangerous was the situation? However, in the blink of an eye, 3 dominators had fallen. Only Bloodlord, who was facing Qinzun, was left. He was afraid that Bloodlord would not be able to escape death. The crowd had never been so confident in Yishuan before. Just as everyone was looking at Yishuan, wondering when he would make a move, Yishuan stopped. He was only in the epic battlefield where the 10 divine cities were. This was already at the periphery of the martial Tao epic. He had to make a move. He just looked at Qinzun. At this moment, the battle between Qinzun and Bloodlord had reached a white-hot stage. Bloodlord's sea of blood drowned the entire primal chaos. Fortunately, they didn't start the battle in the martial Tao epic. Otherwise, Bloodlord alone could pose a huge threat to the martial Tao epic. In the end, a ruler was different from a half-step ruler. A half-step ruler had to work with an endless army to pose a huge threat to the martial epic. However, a ruler could do it alone. If Yishuan did not stop him, it was even possible for a ruler to destroy the martial epic alone. Qinzun was no weaker. The sword Tao he casually sent out could destroy a world. The primal chaos green lotus under his feet also had a great origin. It was the primal chaos green lotus that was truly born in the primal chaos. It had appeared briefly during the creation of the world and then disappeared. Countless people had searched for the primal chaos green lotus, but they all failed in the end. Not only the martial Tao epic, but also the experts of other ancient epics. This was because the primal chaos green lotus appeared not only in the martial Tao epic. There were also legends about the primal chaos green lotus in other epics. It seemed like there had been countless legends about the primal chaos green lotus since a long time ago. For countless epics, countless people had searched for the primal chaos green lotus. However, even the rulers had not succeeded. Now, Qin Zun actually obtained it. Yi Shiwen was somewhat speechless. This Qin Zun's luck was also terrifyingly strong. Normally, only one person could become a supreme ruler in an epic. After Qin Zun achieved his Tao, he blocked everyone else's path. It was just like in the martial epic, when the fortune creation Heavenly Lord seized all the opportunities in the world by himself, blocking everyone else's path to greater heights. However, apart from him, Qin Zun actually had the hope of achieving his Tao. Although it was just a hope, it was already very shocking in a situation where no one else had the slightest chance. The fact that Qin Zun could find the primal chaos green lotus showed that there was a problem. Luck was something that could not be explained clearly. However, at the crucial moment, it would dictate everything. Yi Shiwen looked over. Although Qin Zun was obviously at a disadvantage in the battle with the Blood Lord, he was more tenacious and did not give up at all. Moreover, as the battle went on, Qin Zun's comprehension of the Tao actually accelerated. He needed such an opportunity. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that Qin Zun was making a breakthrough. Yes, after Qin Zun had been in closed-door cultivation for thousands of years, he finally ushered in his opportunity to make a breakthrough. Originally, Qin Zun did not have enough external forces. Hence, he had been given so much time, but he had not succeeded. Now, with the pressure from the Blood Lord, the opportunity that Qin Zun found in the mysterious place was finally going to sprout. Little by little, he was making a breakthrough. Little by little, he was transforming. Yi Shiwen stared at this scene. Qin Zun's transformation was like a textbook for him. It allowed him to observe the changes in Qin Zun's Tao during this process. Such an opportunity was not common. Ordinary half-step rulers would not have the chance to see it. This was equivalent to a ruler teaching you a breakthrough through personal experience. The battle lasted for 10 years. In these 10 years, Qin Zun's gradual transformation finally attracted the attention of the Blood Lord. However, at this time, it was already impossible for him to leave. He could not even extricate himself from the battle. Finally, Qin Zun completed the final transformation. In the chaos, the final world-ending calamity appeared. Chapter 3858. Qin Zun had finally completed his training during the battle. He had completely integrated the opportunity into his body. He was about to undergo the heavenly tribulation. All the half-step rulers in the primal chaos were dumbfounded as they watched the scene unfold before them. Is there really something different about the martial epic? It's not enough to have a fortune heaven monarch. There's also a monster like martial monarch who can fight against a ruler as a half-step ruler. Is there going to be another ruler now? Many people exclaimed. They could accept a miracle if it happened once, but if it happened again and again, they were a little dumbfounded. This had already exceeded the limit of what they could accept. Qin Zun looked at the increasingly powerful heavenly tribulation in the sky. He turned around and said to Yi Shiwen, "Thank you. I'll leave the rest to you." After saying that, Qin Zun took a step forward and entered the depths of the primal chaos. In an instant, the depths of the primal chaos welcomed the endless heavenly tribulation. The martial epic's heavenly Tao extended into the endless primal chaos. The Bloodlord's first reaction was to stop Qin Zun from undergoing his tribulation. The martial epic was already very tricky to deal with in the first place. If someone like Yi Shiwen appeared at this time, it would be a disaster for the other ancient epics. However, just as he was about to move, he discovered that there was another figure in front of him. It was none other than Yi Shiwen. "You want to go over? Don't even think about it." Yi Shiwen looked at him coldly and said, "We haven't settled the score yet. Martial monarch, you're breaking a taboo. You're just a mere martial epic. Yet you want to have 3 rulers?" Bloodlord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. He clearly considered Yi Shiwen as a ruler. With Yi Shiwen's current combat strength, it was not wrong to say that he was a ruler. If that was the case, the martial epic would really become the target of public criticism. In other words, it would become a thorn in many people's eyes. Haha, what a joke. You're talking as if you're not targeting me now, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Since I started my cultivation, I've killed countless strong enemies. What am I afraid of? If they dare to come, they will all end up like you. Die without a burial place. Bloodlord's expression turned ugly when he heard Yi Shiwen's words. He said, "You want to keep me here? Young man, don't go overboard when you do things, or else we'll meet again in the future." Yi Shiwen said, "I don't have anything good to say to you. Today you have come to kill me. Either you die, or I die. There is no other possibility. Today, I'm stronger than you. So, it is only natural for you to die." The Bloodlord looked at Yi Shiwen indifferently. He had been strong all his life. What he did just now was almost his lowest stance. It was impossible for him to go any lower. At this time, he just looked at Yi Shiwen indifferently. He knew that Yi Shiwen would not easily let go of this grudge. The only way was to beat Yi Shiwen until he was afraid. He had seen too many experts. He had even seen the martial epic's fortune creation Heavenly Monarch. He had never been afraid of him. If Yi Shiwen's performance had not been too shocking, killing 3 rulers in a row, he would not have said anything to Yi Shiwen. Boom! Bloodlord made his move. Although he had fought with Qin Zun for a long time, he didn't show any signs of weakness when he made his move. On the contrary, he was still in his peak state. The extreme collision finally began. The Blood Lord grabbed a trident from the boundless sea of blood. It was his ruler Dao tool. He didn't use it when he was dealing with Qin Zun. It was to guard against Yi Shiwen. But now he had no choice but to use it. Yi Shiwen took a step forward and directly killed his way into the boundless sea of blood. He didn't seem to care about the Blood Lord's sea of blood at all. As soon as he stepped into the sea of blood, bloody hands stretched out from the endless sea of blood to grab Yi Shiwen. At this time, Yi Shiwen's body burst with a burst of terrifying light. It was the light of the Gungjin ancestral qi. In an instant, the Gungjin ancestral qi turned into countless sword lights and slashed the bloody hands. Yi Shiwen rushed all the way to the front of the Bloodlord. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch. Behind him, a huge 6 paths of reincarnation formed and turned into a terrifying fist momentum. It pressed down on the Bloodlord, and at that moment, the Bloodlord's figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Yi Shiwen. This speed could be said to be extremely fast. This isn't teleportation. Yi Shiwen didn't feel any fluctuations in space. At this time, the trident had already swept down and stabbed towards Yi Shiwen's head. Dang! The trident hit Yi Shiwen's body and set off a terrifying explosion. The explosion set off a dazzling divine light like a flower. In an instant, it filled the entire world and drowned everything. Just when the Bloodlord thought he was going to succeed, Yi Shiwen's big hand suddenly swept out from the endless divine radiance and directly grabbed the Bloodlord. Whoosh! The Bloodlord's figure disappeared again and instantly dodged the attack. The Bloodlord opened a pair of magic eyes and looked at Yi Shiwen, who was in the endless explosion. Only he knew how powerful his trident was. If an ordinary half-step dominator was swept by it, he would definitely die. There was no possibility of survival. But Yi Shiwen seemed to be unaffected. Even an ordinary dominator couldn't do this. At this time, he seemed to finally understand why the 3 dominators were killed by Yi Shiwen. This Yi Shiwen was far more terrifying than he imagined. Even though he saw Yi Shiwen kill the 3 dominators with his own eyes, he couldn't understand how terrifying Yi Shiwen was without fighting him personally. It was difficult to even injure him, let alone anything else. How can this be? He is just a mere half-step dominator. Logically, no matter how strong he is, there should be a limit. How can he be so strong? The Bloodlord still looked like he couldn't believe it. And opposite him, Yi Shiwen also felt a little strange. He had attacked fast enough, but the Bloodlord still managed to escape. Your running speed is really fast. Yi Shiwen looked at the Bloodlord coldly and said, "In my Blood Sea realm, No one's speed can match up to the injuries and deaths. Even you are useless. I am already in an invincible position, the Blood Lord said proudly. He didn't know how many masters he had fought in his life, including many peerless dominators. But he had never lost. No matter how strong the opponent was, he had never been defeated. He relied on this Blood Sea realm, which gave him unimaginable ability. Not many people could be in an invincible position to this extent. This was his supreme, secret technique. I see. Yishuan nodded. He just sneered slightly and said, Invincible position? I never believed in such a thing. It's just that I am not strong enough to break through your defense. He never believed in an invincible position. In fact, he had heard a lot of such sayings. Even the golden body of merit that he had cultivated was said to be invincible in many legends because no one could break through the golden body of merit. But of course, this was not the case. His golden body of merit had been destroyed more than once. It proved that the golden body of merit was not completely invincible. In the process of mending the sky, he also suffered the backlash of the rules. So he never believed that there was any method that was truly invincible. There were only invincible people. There were no magical powers or secret techniques that were invincible. Since you are invincible in this Blood Sea realm, then I will break your Blood Sea realm. Yishuan said, Ha ha ha. Do you think I didn't think of that? But that is simply impossible. My Blood Sea realm can be reborn infinitely as long as there is a drop of blood left. Blood Lord laughed and said, he didn't mind telling Yishuan some inside stories because even if Yishuan knew, it would be useless if he couldn't break his Blood Sea realm. Yishuan didn't care about this. His whole body began to burn with Nanming fire. In an instant, this flame burned the entire Blood Sea. But soon, he found that no matter how he burned, this Blood Sea seemed to be endless. When he evaporated a piece, it would grow again. As the Blood Lord had said, he was invincible. No one had ever been able to completely evaporate his Blood Sea domain. Therefore, he had told Yishuan about it without any reservation. I said it's impossible. Blood Lord said, while laughing. As soon as his voice fell, he had already appeared in front of Yishuan. The trident was already in front of Yishuan's face, and it seemed like it was going to pierce through Yishuan's body. Yishuan's expression didn't change. He just raised his hand indifferently and blocked the attack. But before Yishuan could launch a counterattack, Blood Lord's figure had already appeared behind Yishuan and launched an attack. Bang! 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 There was a loud roar. Blood Lord's attack was continuous, directly forming afterimages. His afterimages seemed to have turned into countless figures, wrapping Yishuan in it. Relying on the Blood Sea, Blood Lord really exerted the speed law to the extreme. Yishuan had never seen anyone who could be so fast. Even with the help of the Blood Sea, it was already shocking enough. Blood Lord could be ranked among the rulers because he had his unique ability. If he wasn't forced into a corner by Yishuan, he probably wouldn't use all his special skills. I understand, Yishuan shouted loudly. Chapter 38:59. Suddenly, Yishuan roared. Boundless golden light shot out from both of his hands. In an instant, he tore apart the Blood Lord's silhouettes that surrounded him. The two of them faced each other from a distance. In terms of speed and absolute defense, the two of them each occupied a line. Both of them were unable to do anything to the other in their respective domains. Martial Lord, you can't kill me. If you're willing to let go today, let's stop here. How about that? Blood Lord said confidently. In his opinion, he was already giving Yishuan face. If they continued fighting, Yishuan would not be able to do anything to him. But what he was really worried about was Qinzun. If Qinzun successfully passed the tribulation and successfully became a dominator, that would be the most terrifying thing. One dominator could not do anything to him, but two dominators were enough to pose a fatal threat to him. To become a dominator expert, there would not be any obvious shortcomings. For example, his cultivation and physical cultivation was also very strong. It was just that he could not defeat Yishuan, a freak like him. Let go. That's absolutely impossible. Yi Shiwen sneered. I said before that I will kill you, so I will definitely kill you. Umph, you overestimate yourself. Blood Lord snorted coldly. But at this time, he began to look a little anxious. Although it was still early for Qin Zun to pass the tribulation, Yi Shiwen's unyielding attitude was the most terrifying. If Yi Shiwen did not let go even if he died, then he might really be seriously injured or even killed in the end. And just as he was thinking about these things, Yi Shiwen had already moved. He muttered, and suddenly his domain expanded. Yi Shiwen's domain was of course the martial arts domain, but he rarely used it. Generally speaking, he rarely encountered a difficult opponent like Blood Lord. In an instant, 3,000 martial arts completely covered the entire space and began to compete with Blood Lord's Blood Dao law for the control of the rules. Generally speaking, in a space, there could only be one set of rules. It was impossible for a second set of rules to operate. This was because the rules of many eras were completely different. At this time, whoever was stronger would be able to seize more control. You overestimate yourself. You actually want to compete with me in understanding the rules. The Blood Lord laughed heartily. He naturally had his own pride. In terms of comprehension of the principles, he was definitely far superior to Yi Shiwen. No matter what level of fighting prowess Yi Shiwen had, it was useless in this domain. The strong were the strong, the weak were the weak. This was also the reason why Yi Shiwen rarely used this method. It was because he was absolutely weak in this aspect. He would suffer a huge loss if he were to compete with the opponent for the control of the principles. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to persist for long. Yi Shiwen naturally wouldn't use his weakness to confront the enemy's strength head-on. Sure enough, as soon as he released his martial Dao domain, it was completely suppressed by the Blood Sea domain. The domain of a dominator was far stronger than the domain of a half-step dominator. The Blood Lord laughed out loud. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was simply courting his own death. He was completely overestimating himself. Yi Shiwen smiled and took another step forward. In an instant, he appeared in front of the Blood Monarch. The Blood Lord was about to move, but before he could do so, he was hit by Yi Shiwen's fist. Bang! The Blood Monarch flew backward for tens of millions of miles in an instant. A flower of blood burst out of his body, and blood flowed everywhere. Impossible! How can I be hit by someone? The Blood Monarch said in disbelief. At this time, Yi Shiwen had already caught up. He directly transformed into a 10 million feet tall image, and then trampled in the direction of the Blood Monarch. The Blood Monarch directly used the Blood Shield technique to escape this kick, but in the process of escaping, he was still shocked and injured by this kick. And Yi Shiwen's attack had already caught up again in an instant, not giving the Blood Monarch the slightest chance to escape at all. Bang! 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 It was a loud roar. With each roar, the Blood Monarch was hit once. Although each time was not very serious, and he was only swept a little, Yi Shiwen couldn't even touch his clothes before. But now, every attack hit his body. These injuries were endless, and there was no time to stop and recover. They could only accumulate deeper and deeper. In an instant, he was kicked in the chest by Yi Shiwen. Bang! Countless amounts of blood splashed out from the Blood Monarch's body. It was completely different from the boundless Blood Sea. It was his blood essence, and also the essence of his whole body. The Blood Monarch fell into the Blood Sea, and his body was almost blown apart by Yi Shiwen's blow. He also finally escaped from Yi Shiwen's attack range with this blow. I understand. You released the martial arts domain not to compete with me for the control of the law, but to disrupt my absolute control of the law, right? The Blood Monarch also instantly understood Yi Shiwen's plan. Although Yi Shiwen's martial arts domain could not compete with his Blood Sea domain, it was still possible to break his monopoly of the law. Once he was unable to operate the Blood Sea domain perfectly, his speed would no longer be as superb as it was before. This was a fatal flaw of his Sea of Blood domain. However, this was only relative to Yi Shiwen. Even if the Blood Monarch did not have the absolute advantage in speed, generally speaking, he would never be defeated. It was just that he encountered a freak like Yi Shiwen that completely turned his disadvantage into an injury. That's right, without speed, You are nothing. Yi Shiwen pounced again. He already had absolute confidence that he could kill the Blood Monarch and completely eradicate the future threat of an ancient era to the martial arts era. One must know that there were not many ancient eras that could give birth to rulers. Even now, the number of rulers that were still alive would not be that many. Every time one was killed, their power would be reduced. The Blood Monarch's body exploded. He finally could not stand it anymore and was blown up by Yi Shiwen with one hand. The Blood Monarch screamed, and his whole body flew out. Then everyone only saw Yi Shiwen's crazy offensive unfolding. The sky was filled with his shadows. 3,000 shadows, each of which practiced a kind of martial arts, launched a fatal attack. The Blood Monarch's body was blown up countless times. Even he himself could not remember how many attacks he had suffered. The Blood Monarch's body constantly exploded, and blood gushed out. His spirit began to burn. Roar! After the Blood Monarch let out a long roar, he shouted, "Blood seal the world." In an instant, time froze, space froze, and everything froze. Everything was completely sealed by the Blood Monarch's Blood Dao law. But at this time, Yi Shiwen's body actually began to move, breaking the Blood Monarch's Blood Dao law bit by bit. He knew that he didn't have much time left. He looked at Yi Shiwen again. His eyes were full of resentment. He wasn't afraid of death. He was seeking longevity. However, he had already reached this point. How could he not be indifferent to life and death? But he was not willing to die like this, to die in the hands of a half-step ruler. After hundreds of millions of years, Yi Shiwen would definitely become a legend, and he would become the stepping stone for this legend. When people mention him, they would no longer be in awe. They would only say that he was a ruler who died in the hands of a half-step ruler, Yi Shiwen. That kind of life was worse than death. The injuries on his body were too serious to an unprecedented degree. His spirit was burning, and his body was covered in terrible injuries. Even if he could escape this time, he did not know how many epochs he would need to recuperate to be able to recover. His body began to shine, and he struggled to summon all the magic power in his body. Under the control of his spirit, his whole body was sublimated, and a terrible power was boiling from the depths of his body. That was an extremely terrifying power. It was as if the power of creation was boiling within it. "I'm going to kill you." The Blood Monarch held the trident in his hand, and then attacked Yi Shiwen. The trident suddenly turned into a blood dragon that pounced towards Yi Shiwen, mighty and mighty, tearing the chaos apart. This was his final attack. Most of the power in his body had been used to unleash this attack, blood seal the world. The power to unleash this attack was obtained by burning his primordial spirit and the source of the great ways. It could be said that he had bet everything on this attack. Boom! This attack landed on Yi Shiwen's body, and a dazzling blood light burst out. This blood light was like a raging tide, and instantly covered the entire chaos. Everything evaporated under this endless blood light. The chaos evaporated, time evaporated, space evaporated, everything evaporated. Just as the Blood Monarch was feeling complacent, an even more terrible attack broke out from the endless blood light, tearing the blood light, and suddenly blasted on his body. Bang! The Blood Monarch's body exploded again, but this time he could not reassemble his body with difficulty, because his spirit had been completely burned, and in a burst of screams, it was burned into nothingness. This was an extremely terrible conquest. The endless blood light dissipated, and a figure was revealed, but that person was not Yi Shiwen. The last terrifying attack of the Blood Monarch was stopped by the martial honorable seal with 3,000 martial arts, which was why he was able to counterattack. The Blood Monarch was too weak, and after that attack, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. How could he block Yi Shiwen's attack? At this point, the four great rulers had finally fallen. Chapter 3860. The four rulers had invaded the martial epoch, but the martial monarch Yi Shiwen had swept them all away. This battle had shaken the world and all the ancient epochs. The ancient epochs had never imagined that Yi Shiwen and the martial epoch would possess such strength. Or rather, Yi Shiwen actually possessed such strength. Before this, even the craziest person had never imagined that Yi Shiwen possessed such combat prowess. Before this, even someone as powerful as the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch, who could defeat a ruler, had never heard of the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch slaughtering rulers so brutally. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen had slaughtered a total of 6 sovereigns. In many people's eyes, Yi Shiwen had already made a resounding achievement, becoming a ruler slaughterer. Moreover, he had accomplished this as a half-step ruler. This was unprecedented since ancient times. This was what many people feared the most, especially the ancient epics. They knew that every time the current epic became strong, it was the most difficult time for them. Yi Shiwen was so powerful, and he even wanted to prolong the life of the martial epic. This did not conform to the natural order that they knew, nor did it conform to the great Tao that they knew. The replacement of an epoch was the great Tao of primal chaos. Who could stop it? No one could stop it. Many people were secretly wondering when the rulers of that mysterious place would return. Since ancient times, very few rulers who had entered that mysterious place had returned. This was because compared to the great Tao contained within, there were too few things in the outside world that could attract them. In a situation where the rulers were not around, who could stop him? Moreover, even if the rulers came out, they might not be able to stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps. This was what made many people tremble with fear. What worried them even more was that there was already a horrifying half-step ruler, like Yi Shiwen, presiding over the martial epic. Now, Qin Zun was undergoing his tribulation. Once he passed, it would be equivalent to the martial epic having 2 rulers presiding over it. Including the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch in that mysterious place, it would be equivalent to having 3 rulers. The martial epic's prosperity could be said to be unprecedented. No one had ever reached this level. None of the other eras had reached such a level. In the depths of the primal chaos, Qin Zun was still undergoing his tribulation. This tribulation was extremely terrifying. Even with Qin Zun's strength, he was in imminent danger. Once he passed it, he would truly transcend. But if he couldn't, his tens of thousands of years of cultivation would be reduced to ashes. There were heart devil tribulations, terrifying lightning tribulations, wind tribulations, fires, and more. All kinds of calamities broke out in an instant. There was no way to hide. It was like a fire that suddenly arose from Qin Zun's limbs and bones. Then it burned everything. Anything that stood in the way of this fire would be burned to ashes. Furthermore, the lightning tribulation seemed to have locked onto him. Regardless of whether he tried to evade it with the laws of space, the laws of speed, or even the laws of time, it was all useless. All of these lightning tribulations would fall on him. There was no other way. The only way was to endure it and survive. Yi Shiwen saw this scene with his own eyes, and the mysterious space inside his body began to revolve rapidly, trying to analyze the nature of these heavenly tribulations. He wanted to find a way to resist these heavenly tribulations. These heavenly tribulations were simply too terrifying. This scene would happen to him sooner or later, so he had no choice but to seriously consider this problem. As long as he didn't reach the ruler realm, he might fall one day. Even a ruler would face endless tribulations, let alone a half-step ruler. The so-called 10,000 tribulations were just a saying. Yi Shiwen had great ambitions. He wanted to recreate an eternal epoch in the mortal realm. He didn't want to spend countless years waiting for that eternal epoch that would never come. According to the records on the Tao inscription tablet, even if the chaos continued to transform like this, it would take countless eras to achieve such a transformation and perfection. Moreover, it would take an unknown amount of time to achieve such a transformation and perfection. Even he might not be able to endure until that time, not to mention his family and friends. He wasn't like the rulers of the ancient epochs. Their family and friends had already died in the endless river of time. That was why they could pursue the eternal Tao without any worries. In fact, there was really nothing for them to worry about. He had to get over it, because he knew very well that if he wanted to complete this step, he would undoubtedly become the enemy of all the other rulers. Once the heavenly monarchs of the mysterious place came out, the situation would be 10 times worse than it was now. He had to make himself strong enough to survive such a calamity. Only then would the martial epic not be forcefully destroyed. 10 years had passed, and Qin Zun, who was in the primal chaos, found it increasingly difficult to pass the tribulations. The primal chaos green lotus wrapped around his body had exploded more than once, and it was withering more and more. The lightning tribulations that fell from the sky were too horrifying. The primal chaos green lotus wrapped around Qin Zun's body originally had 64 petals, but now there wasn't even half of it left. These primal chaos green lotuses weren't simple illusions. They could regrow at will. Who knew how many years of cultivation would be wasted when one petal was knocked off? Under the protection of the primal chaos green lotus, Qin Zun's bones and flesh flew everywhere. Many people had personally seen how strong Qin Zun was. Back when a martial epic attacked, he had blocked several half-step sovereigns by himself, suppressing those half-step sovereigns to the point where they could not take even half a step forward. Now, he relied on his own strength to block the Blood Lord for so long. Objectively speaking, he had bought enough time for Yi Shiwen to eliminate the other rulers. Otherwise, Yi Shiwen would not be this strong when facing 4 rulers at the same time. After all, although Yi Shiwen had eliminated the 4 rulers, he had done it in sequence. He had eliminated them one by one. In many people's opinion, Yi Shiwen could not possibly win against 4 rulers at the same time. It was already very impressive that he could protect himself. Even when facing the Blood Lord, Yi Shiwen had not been in such a miserable state when he was at a disadvantage. However, under the ruler's heavenly tribulation, he was simply too miserable. As time passed and a few years passed, Qin Zun's physical body actually exploded several times. Blood sprayed the primal chaos several times, and his bones broke countless times. However, they stubbornly reformed. How can the ruler's heavenly tribulation be that easy to clear? The martial epic already has the fortune creation heavenly lord. That is already enough. How can Qin Zun succeed so easily? He is dead for sure. The further he goes, the more horrifying the heavenly tribulation will be. He has already shown signs of defeat here. If this continues, what will happen? Even the heavens cannot bear to see another person like that appear in the martial epic. Many half-step rulers discussed in secret. They had all lost to Qin Zun when he fought for the Tao Foundation. Naturally, they were happy to see Qin Zun fail and die miserably in the heavenly tribulation. That would be the best. However, they did not dare to say it out loud. They did not even dare to interfere with the heavenly tribulation, as Yi Shiwen was in the primal chaos. Anyone who dared to make a move would be seeking death. After destroying 4 rulers in one go, Yi Shiwen's ferocious reputation in the primal chaos soared, reaching a limit. Yi Shiwen could even kill a ruler. What more these half-step rulers? How many moves could they block? This was something many of them knew in their hearts. Otherwise, with their deep hatred for Qin Zun, many of them would rather suffer the heavenly tribulation's backlash and think of a way to kill him. Therefore, they could only pray that the heavenly tribulation would kill Qin Zun. As if sensing the thoughts of these half-step sovereigns, Qin Zun's situation became more and more dire. The heavenly tribulation grew stronger, and the frequency at which Qin Zun's fleshly body exploded increased. Each time, it was more miserable than the last. However, Yi Shiwen's view was different from the half-step rulers. In his eyes, although Qin Zun's body exploded time and time again, the most important thing was that his life aura was endless. The flame of life in his spiritual platform was never extinguished. Although he looked like a pile of eggs, in reality, he was as stable as Mount Tai. Qin Zun's body was shattered again and again, but it was a kind of metamorphosis. It continuously transformed, becoming stronger and stronger. Every time his physical body was shattered and reformed, it would become a little stronger. In the depths of Qin Zun's spiritual platform, a primal chaos green lotus was gradually budding. When this primal chaos green lotus fully bloomed, it would be the time for Qin Zun to cross the heavenly tribulation. However, whether or not he could cross the heavenly tribulation depended on Qin Zun himself. At the very least, his chances were much higher than before. The half-step rulers quickly realized that although Qin Zun looked incomparably miserable, his chances of crossing the heavenly tribulation were gradually increasing. This was because Qin Zun wasn't just being beaten, he was borrowing the power of the heavenly tribulation to transform. Many of the half-step rulers were very old and had lived through many eras. They had seen many of the current era's rulers being born. When those rulers were crossing the heavenly tribulation, they were in the same situation. They weren't just being beaten, they were constantly strengthening themselves. All of them wanted to make a move. They didn't want Qin Zun to succeed. As if he knew what they were thinking, Yi Shiwen released his aura at the right time. It was as if he was warning those half-step sovereigns that if they wanted to make a move, they could try and see if they had the ability to do so. In order to kill Qin Zun, they had to pay with their lives. They didn't have the courage to do so. Another 10 years passed, and the heavenly tribulation gradually dispersed. Qin Zun had finally crossed the heavenly tribulation. Chapter 38:61. The heavenly tribulation had finally dispersed, and so had the terrifying heaven's will that had enveloped Qin Zun. It had disappeared without a trace, leaving nothing behind. If it wasn't for the fact that the nearby chaos had been destroyed to an unknown extent, no one would have imagined that a terrifying heavenly tribulation had once taken place here. Qin Zun, who had survived the final heavenly tribulation, gradually recovered from his injuries. Rays of golden light rose from Qin Zun's body. In just a moment, he had recovered to his original state. At least, that was how it looked on the outside. In the next instant, Qin Zun stepped in front of Yi Shiwen and said, "Many thanks for your help, fellow Taoist. This Qin will never forget this." He knew very well that if it weren't for Yi Shiwen's protection this time, the consequences would have been extremely serious. He might even have died here in a bloodbath. Many of those restless half-step sovereigns wanted to kill him even if they had to pay a certain price. This was all thanks to Yi Shiwen's presence, blocking all the enemies. Qin Zun still addressed Yi Shiwen as fellow Taoist because he recognized Yi Shiwen's combat strength. Otherwise, how could a sovereign address a half-step sovereign as fellow Taoist when the difference between them was so small? Dragons did not live with snakes, and eagles in the sky would not interact with ants on the ground. Only people of the same level could communicate. It's nothing. On the path of seeking the Tao, you and I are both Taoists. Today, you helped me once. Tomorrow, I'll help you once. It's all for the sake of seeking the Tao. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Yi Shiwen waved his hand. At his level, there were simply too few people who could walk with him. People on the path of seeking the Tao were lonely. No one could understand such loneliness. This was because every step he took was unprecedented, and no one would be able to surpass him in the future. The path was long, and he would search from top to bottom, not to mention people who shared the same ideals. There were even fewer people who could be trusted and entrusted to a certain degree. Let's go. We'll return to the martial epic first. Qin Zun nodded. Then, he took a step forward and returned to the martial epic. Yi Shiwen also took a step forward and returned to the martial epic. The two of them sat opposite each other in the divine court. Yi Shiwen raised his cup, took a sip of the immortal wine, and said, "Congratulations on attaining the great Tao, fellow Taoist. From now on, you'll be untainted by dust, untarnished by myriad tribulations, and live forever." Qin Zun shook his head and said, "After entering this realm, I realize that the grand Tao is just the beginning. We are still on the path of the Tao. The most important thing is survival. Half-step sovereigns can live for more than a dozen epochs, while sovereigns can live twice as long. But even if they can live twice as long, their time will come." Yi Shiwen's expression became dignified. Even a Lord Ruler couldn't live for eternity. Even the era of the Lord Ruler had been destroyed. Even the world had its end, let alone a human being. That was why he didn't want to wait one epoch after another until the perfect epoch appeared. He couldn't wait that long, and neither could his friends and family. Even with his protection, they would still have to face the celestial decay after a few epochs. They would die without any disasters or illnesses. Those sovereigns have their own unique methods to prolong their lives. But in general, they are related to the destruction of the epoch. Qin Zun said, "Now I know why those sovereigns spread their great Tao to the new epoch at the beginning of the epoch. It's because they can still improve through this method. They accumulate from epoch to epoch and slowly become stronger. And when the epoch is destroyed, they can also use the methods they left at the beginning of the epoch to completely destroy the epoch and absorb the essence of the epoch to strengthen themselves. And in the martial epoch, who knows how many of those ancient epochs lords of heaven left behind." Yi Shiwen's expression was dignified. Previously, his cultivation was not high enough, so he didn't understand the various key points. Now he understood why devouring Heaven Divine Lord could grow at such a shocking speed. It must be because of the methods left behind by the Insect Lord. With the methods left by the Insect Lord in the martial epoch for tens of thousands of years, devouring Heaven Divine Lord survived the most dangerous stage at the beginning. These sovereigns of the ancient epochs were more cunning than the last. No one knew how many methods they had left behind. So what you're doing now is going against all the sovereigns. You've cut off their path to immortality. How can they tolerate you?" Qin Zun looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "Cough, cough." Qin Zun said, and actually coughed out a strand of golden blood. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly and said, "Are your previous Tao injuries not healed yet?" Qin Zun nodded and said, "That's the Tao injuries left behind from the previous heavenly retribution. I forced the heavenly retribution, but it's just a small problem. If I were a half-step sovereign, these Tao injuries would be enough to kill me. But now that I've crossed that step, I only need a period of closed-door training to recover from the injuries." His words were filled with incomparable confidence, and it was indeed so. With his cultivation, he was indeed at the top of the current world. Moreover, he was in the prime of his life. Even the most difficult-to-heal Tao injuries were only a matter of time for him. Hearing Qin Zun say this, Yi Shiwen felt slightly relieved. To a large extent, he saw Qin Zun as a reliable ally. When facing the unknown future, he could have a helper. Naturally, the stronger Qin Zun was, the better. Even if I'm blocking their path, I still have to fight. If I don't fight, how can I really live until that perfect epoch appears? Those people are just wishful thinking. They definitely can't do it. Yi Shiwen said indifferently, but his words were incomparably firm. Qin Zun didn't understand why Yi Shiwen's sense of crisis was so strong. He was clearly a person born in this epoch. Speaking of which, he still had a very long life. Even as a half-step sovereign, he still had a dozen epochs left to live. Did he really have to fight in the martial epoch? After stepping into the sovereign realm, Qin Zun's vision and thinking were completely different from before. Even his vision could see many epochs into the future. He was no longer limited to the martial epoch. His plans were also more far-reaching. In his opinion, the gains and losses of an epoch were no longer that important. As long as he was still alive, there was still hope. Yi Shiwen could only shake his head. He couldn't tell Qin Zun that he learned from the Tao character steel that there was still an unknown number of years until the perfect epoch arrived. I plan to establish a perfect epoch in the martial epoch. I plan to make the martial epoch into a perfect epoch. Even if I have to go against all the other sovereigns, I don't care. Fellow Taoist, I now formally invite you to join my plan. If my plan succeeds, then you won't have to suffer for so many epochs. Isn't it better to live a carefree and carefree life? Do you want to be like those ancient epic sovereigns, using all sorts of methods to prolong their lives? Yi Shiwen said, "This plan is very difficult and will offend many people. However, to me, it is worth it. Even if there are millions of people, I will still go forward. I just don't know what your choice is." Qin Zun was silent for a while. This invitation was completely different from before. He stood in the position of a sovereign. It was a completely different concept from when he was just a half-step sovereign. His way of thinking was also different. Since fellow Taoist is so ambitious, I am willing to give it a try. However, with your current strength, I'm afraid it is still not enough. Qin Zun said, although you can kill sovereigns as a half-step sovereign. In fact, among the sovereigns, the puppet heaven monarch, the blazing heaven monarch, the insect lord, and the blood monarch are still not the strongest. In fact, they can only be regarded as the weakest among the sovereigns. How are the sovereigns divided? Fellow Taoist, please enlighten me. Yi Shiwen said. He only knew that his combat strength was constantly increasing. However, he did not know how the sovereigns were divided. His realm was not high enough. There were many things that he did not know, even though they were separated by a wall. Qin Zun waved his hand and said, according to the information I obtained after the tribulation, the weakest sovereigns are the ones you killed before. They were only early-stage sovereigns. Then, there is the mid-stage sovereigns. Above them is the late-stage sovereigns. According to my speculation, when the fortune creation heaven monarch entered the mysterious place, he was probably a late-stage sovereign. Above that is the peak sovereign. There must be peak sovereigns in the mysterious place. For example, the founders of the eternal sacred land and the ancient chaos sacred land. Therefore, if you want to contend with them and make the martial epic into the modern world's perfect era, your current cultivation is not enough. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood. Previously, when he was in the eternal sacred land, he had already felt that something was wrong. There were strong and weak sovereigns. Some sovereigns could only enter through the eternal gate. However, there were also strong sovereigns like the fortune creation heaven monarch who could enter the mysterious place by himself. Yi Shiwen immediately felt an immense pressure. After this, I will go into closed-door cultivation to heal my injuries. After that, I will break through to the late-stage sovereign. I have been preparing for this day. There is hope in tens of millions of years. However, during this time, you can only rely on yourself, fellow Taoist. With your half-step sovereign body, your current combat strength is already the limit. If you want to improve further, the only way is to break through to the sovereign realm. With your accumulation and foundation, once you break through, I am afraid that you will directly enter the late-stage sovereign realm. If that is the case, your plan may still be possible. Chapter 3862. Yi Shiwen's words gave Qin Zun a new idea. To establish an eternal great era in the present world. What kind of breadth of mind? What kind of shocking idea was this? This was different from Qin Zun's original idea. To make the martial arts era into a perfect era, there were too many heavenly Daos to be complemented. It even included many heavenly Daos that had not appeared yet. This principle was not difficult to understand. There were even rulers who had tried to do it, but no one had succeeded. It was already very difficult to integrate the heavenly Daos that had already appeared into the current era. However, this was not the key problem. The most difficult thing was the era Daos that had not appeared yet. If the current era was not destroyed, then the new era Daos would not appear. In that case, integrating the new era Daos was simply a fantasy. It was impossible to achieve. Even as powerful as they were, they could not predict what the next era Daos would be like and how they would operate. Therefore, even if they tried their best, they could only complete the great Daos to a certain extent and extend the lifespan of the era to a certain extent. However, that was all they could do. There was still a long way to go to recreate a perfect era in the human world. It was absolutely impossible. If they could create an eternal era, then it would be fine. However, if they could not do it and only wanted to extend the lifespan of the current era, then they would violate the taboo of the rulers. This was also the reason why Qin Zun was hesitant at the beginning. He was not afraid of fighting anyone, but it was not wise to fight against the rulers for something that was impossible. However, fighting against the rulers is fine. However, this is just the beginning. The key is, are you confident that you can complete the great Daos of the world? Just the great Tao of those ancient eras is already complicated and difficult to understand. If you want to make up for the great Tao of the future eras that haven't appeared yet, then it's even more impossible. This isn't a matter of probability, it's a matter of impossibility. Qin Jun said doubtfully, "Do you have a way to do this?" When Yishuan heard this, he immediately understood Qin Jun's concerns. For ordinary rulers, this was simply impossible. "I am sure that I can do it, but the process may be very difficult." Yishuan nodded and didn't conceal anything from Qin Jun. Qin Jun's eyes lit up. He suddenly thought of something and said, "It's the wordless Taoist steel in that mysterious place." Xiaoqin nearly immediately thought of the crux of the matter. If such an item existed in the martial epoch, he would have known about it long ago. In fact, the Fortune Heavenly Lord would not even have a chance to obtain it. Therefore, he immediately thought of the wordless Tao tablet. The reason for that was because he still remembered that the great Taos contained within the wordless Tao steel could practically be said to contain the great Taos of the various eras. Regardless of the era, a half-step sovereign would be able to comprehend their own Tao from it. Even many sovereigns were looking for this wordless Tao steel. However, the wordless Tao steel always appeared irregularly. But now, Yishuan had actually obtained it. He originally felt that it was a pity, but he didn't expect that this wordless Tao steel could complete the great Tao. This was possible. If the wordless Tao steel contained many great Taos from ancient eras, then it was indeed possible. What truly shocked Qin Jun was that the wordless Tao steel actually contained information about the future epoch. That's right. Yishuan nodded. He didn't want to hide it from Qin Jun. Although this was the most confidential of secrets, he felt that Qin Jun was trustworthy. If fellow Taoist is interested, you can come to the divine court to comprehend it together with me after I finish mending the heavens. In the future, we may have to face powerful enemies. If we don't do this, we won't be able to resist. Yishuan said. Qin Jun's eyes immediately lit up. If he could continue to comprehend the wordless Tao steel, then the benefits could be imagined. Now I finally understand why fellow Taoist is so powerful. With a half-step sovereign body, you can actually contend against a mid-stage sovereign expert. I'm afraid it's also because of the wordless Tao steel. Qin Jun said. Yishuan's achievements were heaven-defying. Only he knew how many fortuitous encounters he had had. However, Qin Jun, who was watching from the sidelines, could only feel incomparably shocked. It's indeed because of the wordless Tao steel. Yishuan nodded and didn't hide it. In fact, if it wasn't for the wordless Tao steel, just relying on the heavenly merit wouldn't have been enough for him to break through to this point. It was almost a miracle. All right, I'll disturb fellow Taoist when the time comes. Fellow Taoist is really broad-minded to open the wordless Tao steel to me. Being able to reach this step, you're indeed worthy of your reputation. Qin Jun said admiringly. Fellow Taoist is too polite. In the future, you and I will need fellow Taoist's help to mend the heavens. Yishuan said. He wasn't worried that the wordless Tao steel would be lost. The wordless Tao steel's tool spirit and the mysterious space had already been refined by him. He was only opening it now, so there was nothing to worry about. Besides mending the heavens, the most important thing he had to do now was to cross the heavenly tribulation and become sovereign. Once he crossed the heavenly tribulation, he might directly become a late-stage sovereign. He might even be stronger than Qin Jun, who had just broken through to the mid-stage sovereign. However, it was precisely because of this that his heavenly tribulation would be terrifying. It would be much more terrifying than Qin Jun's heavenly tribulation. It might even attract the attention of sovereign. Right now, Yishuan had the martial epic behind him. It could be said that he had no flaws. However, if he crossed the heavenly tribulation, he would reveal his biggest flaw. Once he crossed the heavenly tribulation, he might face a double attack from both the heavenly tribulation and the human tribulation. Even with Yishuan's current strength, he would find it extremely troublesome. It might even be a situation where he had a slim chance of survival. However, if he could get Qin Jun's help, his chances of success would be much higher. The two of them could be said to be mutually beneficial. Neither would take advantage of the other. While Yi Shiwen and Qin Jun finalized their cooperation in the Divine Court, the martial epic also fell into chaos because of the matter between the two of them. After so many years, the martial epic had actually broken the curse of not having two sovereigns in one epic. Another sovereign had actually appeared. Previously, Yi Shiwen could not be counted. Although he had attained the combat prowess of a sovereign, in reality, he was still only a half-step sovereign. It was just that ordinary people had already treated him as a sovereign. However, Qin Jun was different. He was a bona fide sovereign, a sovereign who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the fortune heavenly monarch. Countless people were excited, especially when the martial epic was facing a decline for the first time. Everyone was panicking. Qin Jun's appearance was undoubtedly like a shot in the arm, making them all livelier. Our martial epic can be saved. At the very least, we can prosper for tens of millions of years. From now on, our martial great sect will be unrivaled in the world. No one can stop us. It is time to accomplish something great. That's not right. The martial great sect might not be unrivaled in the world, but it can at least stand on equal footing with the Divine Court. Countless experts in the martial great sects were also cheering. Although the martial epic was known as the Three Great Holy Lands, everyone knew that the Divine Court realm was the most respected of the Three Great Holy Lands. Below the Divine Court realm was the martial great sect, followed by the creation divine capital. Everyone knew that among the Three Holy Lands, the fortune divine capital was the most experienced and had the deepest accumulations. However, its leader, the heavenly venerate, was the weakest among the Three Holy Lands. Therefore, the fortune divine capital naturally could not stand alone among the Three Holy Lands. Among the Three Holy Lands, the strongest was Yi Shiwen. Naturally, the Divine Court was also the strongest among the Three Holy Lands. Now, with Qin Jun defying the heavens and successfully advancing to a sovereign, the martial great sect had also leaped up and become a colossus that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Divine Court. This gave many people more confidence in the martial epic. After all, there were now two sovereigns overseeing the martial epic. If the Fortune Divine Lord was included, then there were three sovereigns overseeing the martial epic. This was the strongest martial epic since ancient times. After finalizing the deal with Yi Shiwen, Qin Jun returned to the martial great sect and held a grand banquet in the Hundred Birds Palace. The heavenly venerates and emperors of the various factions were all invited. Yi Shiwen did not go because he had to prepare for the mending of the heavens. With his cultivation and status, it was up to him whether to go or not. There was no need to worry about some issues of understanding. However, he also sent Bian Xiaoye to represent the Divine Court to congratulate Qin Jun on achieving the Great Tao. These emperors and heavenly venerates also rushed to the martial great sect early. They wanted to see the glory of the second sovereign since ancient times. However, not everyone was qualified to pay their respects to him. Bian Xiaoye, who represented the colossus that was the Divine Court, was naturally qualified to meet him. Bian Xiaoye had already landed at the foot of the martial great sect's divine mountain and walked up the white jade steps. Beside Bian Xiaoye, there was a young girl around 13 or 14 years old. She looked quite tall and had a little baby fat on her face. When she walked with Bian Xiaoye, who looked no more than 18 or 19 years old, they looked like a pair of sisters. Martial ancestor, this martial great sect's divine mountain looks very grand. Is that the legendary Hundred Birds Palace at the top of the mountain? The 13 or 14-year-old girl looked up and saw a solemn and magnificent palace at the top of the mountain. She could see the carved beams and painted pillars with flying dragons and phoenixes. It looked very grand. Her words attracted the attention of many people who were also walking on the stone steps. This was because on the martial sect divine mountain, there were layers of formations everywhere. This young girl was able to see through the formation barrier and see the Hundred Birds Palace with a single glance. This skill had already surpassed most of the experts in the world. Chapter 3863. Those who came to pay their respects to King Qin were naturally the heroes of a region. Only emperors could pay their respects to King Qin from afar. Only heavenly masters and above were qualified to enter the palace. As for those quasi-emperors and divine kings, they could only kowtow from afar outside the Phoenix Palace. In other words, they were not qualified to pay their respects to King Qin. Otherwise, King Qin would not have to do anything else. He would have to wait for these people to pay his respects until the end of time. Even so, those who were qualified to pay their respects felt that it was a supreme honor. For them, this was not a disgrace. On the contrary, it was a supreme honor. Just like how many people felt proud to have paid their respects to the fate creation Heavenly Lord in the past. When they heard the little girl's words, they all turned their heads. When they saw Bian Xiaoye, many people involuntarily knelt down and saluted, "Greetings, Moon Supreme." Bian Xiaoye was now a famous top powerhouse in the world. She was also in charge of a colossus like the Divine Court. It could be said that apart from Yi Shiwen, King Qin, and the Middle Heavenly Masters, she was already one of the top powerhouses. Tens of thousands of years ago, even the most imaginative person would not have imagined that the girl who lived a miserable life at the foot of Mount Buzhou could actually climb to the top and become one of the top powerhouses in the world. "Get up," Bian Xiaoye said faintly. Then, she walked up step by step with the little girl. Those people naturally did not dare to walk in front of Bian Xiaoye. They could only watch Bian Xiaoye leave. King Qin has achieved the Great Way. This is an epic-making event. I did not expect that even the ruler of the Divine Court, Moon Supreme, would personally come to congratulate him. This also represents the attitude of the Divine Court. Many people felt that it was normal for Bian Xiaoye to personally come to the mountain to congratulate him. Bian Xiaoye was indeed extraordinary. She was even a top powerhouse in the martial epic. However, in front of King Qin, she was just like an ant. It was normal for her to personally come to pay her respects. However, many people felt lucky because the two giants, the Divine Court and the martial sect, did not fight against each other. Many of them were from the era when the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the Chaos Divine Dynasty were at war, or even earlier, when the Fortune Divine Lord was still alive. At that time, there were also a few forces like the martial sect and the Divine Palace that were like the sun in the sky. However, the battles between them were simply life or death. It could be said that all living beings in the world were plunged into misery and suffering. None of the living beings in the world could survive. Right now, even though the three holy lands were standing on equal footing, all in all, under the restraint of the three supreme beings, even though there were some frictions, it didn't amount to much. They were basically united against the outside world. This was the sign of world peace, and they would not be forced to kill each other. To them, this was the most important thing. Although many people could rise from this kind of killing and tempering, the truth was that every rising person had stepped on millions of corpses. A general success was built on the bones of tens of thousands. This was not an adjective, but a fact. Bian Xiaoye held the girl's hand and walked up the white jade stairs step by step. She pointed to the 100 birds looking towards the Phoenix Palace locked in layers of fog and said, "Yes, that is the 100 birds looking towards the Phoenix Palace." It was condensed by Lord Qin's great power. Lord Qin's great power is not inferior to my master, that is your ancestor, Bian Xiaoye said. Bian Xiao looked at the girl, trying to find a bit of Yi Shiwen's shadow in her. But in fact, it was impossible. This girl was a descendant of Yi Shiwen countless generations away. Her name was Zihan. She was not a descendant of Yi Kongming's lineage, but a descendant of Yi Junshin's lineage. To be precise, she was a descendant of Yi Shiwen's younger brother. Although they did not come to the Fortune Realm, there were still many people who came with them at that time, and Zihan was a descendant of that branch. Although her surname was not Yi, she was indeed a descendant of Yi Shiwen. Zihan was detected to be extremely rare when she was just born. The 9 innate Taoist body was an extremely rare physique. Not long after she was born, it alarmed the higher-ups in the Divine Court, and it was even reported all the way to Bian Xiaoye. Bian Xiaoye liked her, So she brought Zihan with her and trained her personally. Now, she was only more than 100 years old, and she had already become a deity. Many people in the divine court even said that she was almost the next Bian Xiaoye. In the past, Bian Xiaoye was personally guided by Yi Shiwen, and her cultivation was also advancing by leaps and bounds. Originally, with her cultivation, she could not see through the fog that locked the martial sect Divine Mountain. However, she was born with a pair of Taoist eyes that could see through all the obstacles between heaven and earth. No illusion could affect her. It could be said that she was a natural cultivator. You should know that with your cultivation, you don't even have the qualifications to pay your respects to King Qin. I brought you here to broaden your horizons. In the future, you will have to deal with the martial sect. Bian Xiaoye said. She intended to train Zihan to become the next divine court master. Just like how Yi Shiwen had passed the position of divine court master to her, she also wanted to pass on the position of divine court master. She also wanted to break through to a higher realm and eventually become a half-step ruler. She had heard Yi Shiwen say that when the Grand Tao was completed in the future, they would all have the opportunity to become half-step rulers. In fact, it was not impossible for them to become rulers in the future. In the past, they could not produce rulers because the world was like a pool, and the pool was only so big. Once there was a ruler, there was naturally no room for other rulers. But if the pool was dug bigger, there would be an environment for other rulers to be born, and this was their opportunity. Therefore, she could not let this opportunity slip away and let her cultivation be a hindrance. When the time came, it was only a matter of time before she handed over the divine court. Among the younger generation, she was most optimistic about Zihan, which was why she had personally taken her with her to guide her. The selection of the divine court headmasters was naturally based on talent and ability, not on seniority. Generation after generation. I understand. Zihan nodded. Although she looked young, she was actually more than 100 years old. She was not a child anymore. She was a descendant of the golden generation born after the rise of the human race, and the martial epic entered a prosperous stage. The children born in the golden generation were as many experts as there were clouds and geniuses. There were many who proved the Tao at 100 years old, and many who proved the divine monarch Tao at 1,000 years old. However, after the golden generation, the quality of the children born to the human race had clearly declined. That was why Zihan had shocked the entire divine court the moment she was born. Even in the era of the golden generation, her physique was extremely rare. This attracted Bian Xiaoye's attention. However, she had heard the old ancestor Bian Xiaoye mentioned since she was born. Her ears had almost grown calluses from hearing about him. Everyone in the world respected him when he was mentioned, but she had never seen him. In fact, almost no one in the new generation had seen Yi Shiwen. His figure had long since become a myth, a legend. Previously, she cultivated in the divine court every day and rarely left the mountain. The power of the divine court only existed in her imagination. But now, she finally had a direct view of it. No matter who they met along the way, whether it was a terrifying old monster with an aura as deep as the sea of stars or a terrifying big guy, they all had to lower their heads in front of Bian Xiaoye. Innate gods, postnatal peerless masters, all had to respect the prestige of the divine court. Not only did they respect the name of the divine court, but they also respected Bian Xiaoye's reputation over the years. As Bian Xiaoye walked, a ripple appeared in her already calm state of mind. In the blink of an eye, many years had passed, but that scene seemed to have happened just yesterday. At that time, she was just like Zihan, following beside Yi Shiwen, watching the world's heroes crawling in front of the invincible figure at her heart, not daring to look up at him. At that time, Yi Shiwen's strength had been deeply rooted in her heart, and now she had also brought along the younger generation that she thought highly of. It was just like passing on the torch. The divine palace would be able to last for a long time and exist forever. Even if the era was destroyed, their divine palace would continue to pass on forever. The higher she went, the more Empyreans and Empyreans Bian Xiaoye encountered. She didn't even look at the Empyreans and just walked past them. As for the Empyreans, she only nodded slightly to acknowledge them. She represented the divine palace, and this was already a return of courtesy. On the other hand, Zihan suddenly became nervous. Every single one of those people who bowed to Bian Xiaoye was a magnate of a region. She had seen the portraits of these people, and they were the top figures in the world. Bian Xiaoye could ignore them because she was not only the leader of the divine court, who had the power to destroy the world, but also because she was one of the strongest experts in the world. However, she could not take those people seriously. She carefully saluted one by one, and in return, she received kind eyes. Those people might not give face to Bian Xiaoye, but they had to give face to martial monarch Yi Shiwen. As long as that majestic figure was still there, the divine court would be so high and mighty. In Zihan's heart, she was extremely shocked. In just one day, her view of the world had been completely overturned. She couldn't help but have a thought in her heart. When would I be able to have such an awe-inspiring day? People at the Tao confirming level were nothing in front of these big shots. They could kill millions of them with one finger. Master, after I go back, I want to practice in seclusion, Zihan said to Bian Xiaoye seriously. Bian Xiaoye smiled and nodded. This was the purpose of bringing Zihan along. In her opinion, Zihan was practicing the power technique that Yi Shiwen had planned for her. So, it was only natural for her to be outstanding with her innate talent. However, she couldn't neglect Zihan like this. As the two walked, the Phoenix Palace finally appeared in front of them. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.